afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Richplanet, and this is organised by the UNXplained Conference. We're a local group. We decided to run these kind of events because we're having trouble kind of travelling up. Most events couldn't be in London and beyond, etc. So we tried to kind of get a venue down here in the southeast so we can host shows like this. And we're very, very pleased to have Richard along with us today. Just a few things just for health and safety reasons. In the event of a fire, a false flag operation or an invasion, those two, this one here, and that leads out to the street, you get away, that'll be fine. And just a reminder about mobile phones as well. Just please put them on silent, just for a quick message. But now, that's the end from me, and now the main event, the UNXplained Conference would like to present and welcome Richard D. Hall.
Welcome to Richplanet TV. I am Richard D. Hall. Okay, just like to thank Carl and Bryn for providing the venue and inviting me down to Margate, because I wouldn't have been here if it wasn't for them, and they've done a fantastic job in helping set the kit up and just providing all the support that I needed for today at Margate. I've never been to Margate before, and I like what I see. It's lovely. Okay, so I've split today's talk up into two sections. Section 1 will be about an hour and a half. It's quite a long time, so if you want to come and go and get drinks or what have you while I'm talking, that's fine. And I've entitled it Seeing the Subversion, and that title will become apparent during the talk. Well, it says 15-minute break on the screen there, maybe half an hour or longer break, because you can order food if you want for the break. In part 2, I'm going to be talking about the secret space program. It's entitled Don't Ask NASA, because it's not NASA who are building secret spacecraft. Okay, we'll get straight on with it. Just a quick announcement first. If you've watched my TV show, you will be aware of the work of Wilson and Blackett, two historians who started in the 1980s trying to discover the truth and the true genealogy of King Arthur, and they discovered that there were in fact two King Arthurs. And they've done more research into this area than anyone. They've published 9 books. And they discovered that one of the King Arthurs rests in South Wales, and they've located the approximate place where King Arthur was buried. Now, if you're not aware of this work, you might be thinking, King Arthur wasn't even a real king. Yes, he was a real king, and this is something that the academic establishment do not want to admit into their universities. Okay, these guys have had more than one murder attempt against them. They've had smear attempts, all kind of attempts to try and discredit their incredible work. And you might ask, well, why is that? Well, I think it's probably because the British establishment do not want a major historical figure like King Arthur being dug up in South Wales, because Welsh people might just want their country back. Okay, it's all to do with power and control. So what they've decided to do in their latest book, or Baron Blackett's latest book, is to not write a history book, write a book about all of the smear attempts and murder attempts. Baron Blackett had a bomb put under his bed in 2011. He was in a coma for 11 days, and he had a 25% chance of living. And they believe that that was all done by MI5. All right, now it's all in this book if you want to have a look. It's written more like a spy novel, but it's true. Okay, it's entitled The Satanic Protocol: Criminality in the Secret State Revealed as Never Before. You'll notice the author is Grant Bartley. Well, the author is in fact Baron Blackett. They had to start using fake author names because intelligence agencies had some of their publishers closed down, so they would write under a pseudonym. Okay. Now, you may have seen on the way in that I've produced a new documentary all about the Madeleine McCann case. It is in fact 4 documentaries, 4 feature-length documentaries in one box. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, this is not really the kind of issue that Richplanet would normally cover. It's not of global significance. It's effectively a personal tragedy story. Now, but it has become a story of global significance. I'm going to explain why. I wasn't really interested in the case until about 2011, and I started doing my own research. I did what I normally do when I'm looking into an issue. I forget everything I've read in the mainstream and do my own research from independent sources. And one of the sources that I used in 2011 was this website, McCannfiles.com. So you could probably spend a couple of weeks on that website and still not read every word of it. It's got every interview that's ever been done by the McCanns. It's got all the news reports, the police files that were released by the Portuguese police. So I spent quite a lot of time on that website, and I formed my own view as to what I think happened in 2011 based on the evidence. So I actually put something on the McCanns in my talk in 2012, and I spoke briefly about it in Edinburgh and in Kilmarnock, but there were sections of the audience I could sense did not like me talking about it. And I dropped it from my talk. I didn't feel I had the knowledge that I have now, feel confident enough to bring this issue out, the true information about this issue. Now, is there anyone in this room who doesn't know that phrase? You would have had to have been to Mars for the last 7 years not to know who that is. In fact, if you listen to part 2 of my talk, even people on Mars might know who that is. That's the first point. That's the first reason why this story is important, because there's not a person in the country who doesn't know who that is. People aren't interested in 9/11, the average person. They're not interested in 7/7. They're not interested in UFOs. They don't care. But everyone in the country has been forced to become interested in Madeleine McCann, whether they like it or not. You want to get the phone? Right, okay. So, the other reason why this is an important story is because the mainstream media have lied and lied and lied about this issue. So because of those two facts, this, in my opinion, represents the best narrative, the best story to hang the mainstream media out to dry. Because more people will look at it, because they've been forced to be interested in it, and they've lied on this issue as much as they have on 9/11 and 7/7. So I'm not particularly interested in the story itself. What I've made these documentaries for is to expose mainstream media for what they truly are, because I think this will go to a wider audience than any of my other material. So that's why I've made this documentary. So I went out there in March this year. This is me next to this landmark in Pride of Luz, which is on the top of the cliffs there, overlooks the main bay. It's a trig point. The McCanns used to run from their apartment to this landmark back when they were there. I spent about 5 days there, and I have filmed places that you've not seen in any mainstream documentary, and covering parts of this story that most people have no clue about. Now, just a breakdown of the films. The first film is all about that first night, and all of the evidence from that, what was said in the media, what police statements said, what contradictions arose. The second film is predominantly about the police sniffer dogs which went out to Pride of Luz. They were British police sniffer dogs which searched the McCann's apartment. The third film is about the private investigations that the McCanns were running, or have been for the last 7 years, to allegedly try and find Madeleine. And the fourth film is entitled Government Agents, and it covers all of the government assistance that the McCanns have had. Now, I mentioned police sniffer dogs. One of the world's top police sniffer dog experts, Martin Brown, actually went out to Pride of Luz at the request of the Portuguese authorities to search not just the McCann's apartments, but all the apartments in that block. He has 2 sniffer dogs. One of them is trained to bark if it sniffs the scent of cadaver. That's human corpse. So it will only bark if it senses the presence of or past presence of a human corpse. The other dog is trained to bark when it smells human blood. So they were both used on separate days, so there's no confusion between the two of them. So I'm going to show you a very short clip from my new film. This is just a tiny part of the evidence. Here we go.
In early August 2007, he brought his 2 dogs to Portugal. One of them, Eddie, was trained to alert to the odour of human corpses, and the other, Keela, to blood. As we shall see in detail, Martin Grime told Portuguese police officers that Eddie had detected the scent of death in no fewer than 11 locations associated with the McCanns, while Keela also detected the scent of blood in 3 of those very same locations. The dogs were deployed on different days, so they alerted to these locations independently of each other.
What I first noticed is that as soon as I came in, the dog's very excited, and as a handler I can pick up his body language, etc. It would appear to me that as soon as he's come in in the house. He's picked up a scent that he recognises. If there isn't a scent source in here, i.e. a physical article where the scent is emitting from, any scent residue will collect in a particular place due to the air movement of the flat, of the apartment. And what I would say in this case is that there's enough scent in that area there for him to give me a arc indication. That the source may not be in that cupboard, the source may well be in this room somewhere else, but the air is actually pushing it into that corner. But it's a strong indication, and I would say it's positive for the things that he's trying to find.
And he's decided, yes, that's what I'm looking for, and that's going to give me the mark indication. What we should understand with this dog is that he only barks when he finds something. He won't bark at any other time. The only times I've ever known him bark since I got him as a small puppy was pay for his dinner, and that's just excitement, and that's one of the training methods we use to teach him to bark when we wanted him to, and when he actually finds something. He won't bark at other dogs, he won't bark at strangers, he won't bark when somebody knocks on the door or anything like that. So again, I would say that's a positive indication. Let there be no doubt about what Martin Brown said his dogs were alerted to. He said, in effect, that his dogs were alerted to the past presence of a human corpse in those 11 locations. As we shall see in a moment, no other corpses had been present in those 11 locations. Therefore, if a corpse really had been in contact with those 11 locations, it could only have been that of Madeleine McCann. By July, 2 months into the investigations into Madeleine's disappearance, the team of detectives, led by Dr. Conchalo Amaral, had clearly formed the view that the McCanns and their friends were not telling the truth and were hiding something. They and top British police actively worked on the theory that Madeleine had in fact died in the McCann's holiday apartment, and that the McCanns, perhaps with the help of others, had hidden or disposed of her body.
Right, now of those 11 locations in Martin Grimes' report, 9 of them were listed in the Portuguese Attorney General's report. So I'm just going to go through them. So the cadaver dog alerted in the McCann's bedroom, the blood and the cadaver dog alerted behind the settee in the McCann's apartment, the cadaver dog alerted in an area on the patio, the cadaver dog alerted to the soft toy cuddle cat, Madeleine's toy. 2 items of Kate McCann's clothing, cadaver alerted on those. Cadaver alerted outside the McCann's hire car. Cadaver and blood alerted to on the key of that vehicle. Blood alerted to in the boot of their vehicle, and blood alerted to on the inside of the door of their vehicle. Now, here's a police photograph of the settee. It's pulled away from the wall where blood and cadaver were alerted. Now the police, or the forensics, these are the points on the wall where they were able to actually extract blood and body fluids in the apartment. Because of those 11 locations, they could only get physical evidence from 2 of those locations. One of them was on the wall behind the settee, and the other one was in the boot of the hire car. So there was DNA testing done on both of those samples, and it was a 15 out of 19 indication that it was Madeleine McCann's blood. That's a scientific term, and what it means is that it was a 1,000,000 to 1 chance that the blood in the apartment and in the car is not Madeleine McCann's. 1,000,000 to 1 chance that it's not her blood. We've got cadaver being alerted in the bedroom as well. Now that's one small part of the evidence in my DVDs that you probably haven't heard on mainstream TV. Now, I'm going to give you my beliefs on this case because I can't state as fact what I think occurred for fear of libel, right? But it's still legal in this country to express your beliefs, right? So I'm going to list these as my beliefs on this case, but these beliefs are based on strong evidence. My first belief is that Madeleine McCann died in April or May 2007. Now, she was reported missing on May the 3rd, 2007. I've spoken to a few researchers in this case who've been at it for years, and they suspect she died at least 3 days before she was reported missing. I believe that Madeleine McCann's corpse was situated in McCann's holiday apartment for a period of time. I believe that Madeleine McCann's corpse was transported in the McCann's Renault Scenic hire car some weeks after she died. I believe there's been a high-level cover-up about what really happened. I believe there is a reason for that high-level cover-up, which goes further than most people have contemplated. Now, I'm not prepared even to say what I think that reason is in public. The story represents, I believe, the story represents the best opportunity to expose mainstream media as nothing more than perception management propagandists. So you might say, well, what about this current investigation that's going on now by Scotland Yard, that was launched in 2011, authorised by David Cameron? My opinion, it's just one massive psychological operation to try and get the public, to convince the public that Madeleine was abducted. This is being driven by the intelligence agencies, so they can manipulate the BBC into making these kind of documentaries. Now, I do make much use of this slide in the second and third films in the series. This explains how the cover-up has been operating over the last 7 years. Because just 3 days after Madeleine went missing, just 3 days, the government or the Cabinet Office appointed Clarence Mitchell, and he's been the central figure in all of this for the last 7 years. Clarence Mitchell was Tony Blair's senior spin doctor. He was running a team of 40 staff, and their job was to control what comes out in the media. So Clarence Mitchell was made the McCann's media relations officer, and he handled all the media storm around the incident. So why would the government appoint their senior spin doctor in a case which is effectively just a personal tragedy story that Madeleine could have been found at any time? It's only 3 days missing, and the top government spin doctor is sent out, or is put in charge of all of the media storm. That makes no sense whatsoever. Now, Mitchell has been overseeing the McCann team. What I mean by the McCann team is McCann started a limited company not long after Madeleine was allegedly reported missing. Consisted of themselves as directors and another member of their family and various other people who are all named in my documentary. Now, that team has been using rogue agencies, rogue private investigation agencies, and I'm confident to stand here and say that all 3 agencies that they have used were rogue agencies, because there's at least 3 people served 4-year prison sentences who've been involved in those agencies. One of them was exposed on Channel 5, but they haven't exposed the others. Now, if you look at the evidence shows you that these rogue agencies have been responsible for producing many of the stories that appeared in our mainstream media. So stories such as Madeleine is at the bottom of a reservoir, Madeleine is being held in the lawless hills of Pride and Luz, Madeleine was abducted by someone who looks like Victoria Beckham, Madeleine is in America, Madeleine is in Germany, Madeleine is in Morocco. All of these completely fake stories that you've seen on the front pages of our mainstream newspapers, most of them have been generated by these agencies, right? Fed up through to Clarence Mitchell and planted in our mainstream media with the intention of misleading the public. Now, you might notice on my diagram there that I've got MI5 and MI6. The guy who I just showed you, Martin Grimes, the police sniffer dog expert, he was intercepted at Faro Airport by MI5. Why does British intelligence need to do that? The McCann team have been employing somebody called Gary Hagland. Gary Hagland is an expert in money laundering. Why do they need to employ an expert in money laundering to find a little girl? Well, he happens to have connections in MI6, and that's just 2 of the connections to the intelligence agencies of this case. Many more are exposed in my films. So intelligence agencies have had their hands all over this case. The Cabinet Office of Gordon Brown was leaning on the Portuguese authorities not long after the alleged disappearance. Gordon Brown was ringing them saying, right, you need to put out a statement from Jane Tanner, who supposedly saw an abductor. Now, the Portuguese police did not believe Jane Tanner's statement that an abductor was seen carrying a child from the apartment. They didn't believe it. They thought she fabricated that story because she was trying to protect the McCanns. So they did not want that made public. Gordon Brown's ringing them up, telling them, what has that got to do with Gordon Brown? Nothing. It's a different country. You should be leaving the police to get on with their investigation. Gordon Brown also made several telephone calls to Jerry McCann. And every Prime Minister has had their fingers in this case. Sherry Blair, Tony Blair's wife, I think it was just 3 days after the alleged disappearance, was ringing Kate McCann, giving her reassurance. Now, after the evidence I've just shown you, which suggests there is a cloud over this case at the very least, why would a Prime Minister sully their reputation and get involved in a domestic, personal tragedy issue? That's not what Prime Ministers do. And every one of them have been involved. So, as I said, Gordon Brown was telephoning Jerry McCann, Blair's wife was telephoning Kate McCann, David Cameron launched or approved an investigation which was started by Scotland Yard in 2011, 4 years after the disappearance, after the Portuguese police had closed the case. Why would they need to do that? Well, this is why. Because they're puppets of the intelligence agencies. Once you realise that this cover-up is being run by British intelligence, you realise that that's where their involvement has come from. They're puppets. Now, I just want to say one thing about the DVD. It's for sale for 15 quid and it's over 4 hours of documentary. This is a forensic documentary. It's not like what you'll see on mainstream. It's not talking about people's emotions and how they felt. There's vast amounts of police witness statements in here. Quotes from Kate McCann's book, quotes from the media, all of the contradictions in the case. Right? You will not see anything like this on mainstream media. It's 15 quid here, it's 20 quid to buy online, but I'm waiving copyright on this film. So if you want to buy a copy here and make 1,000 copies and hand them out in the street, I'm happy for you to do that. And in a couple of weeks' time, I will be putting it online to watch free of charge if you don't want to buy it. Right? So, okay, I might sell between 100 and 200 on this tour and recover my costs, because I've been out there, flights, etc. And I need to make a little bit of money to fund future films. So I'm not trying to make millions of pounds out of this. Anyone can copy it, it's free to copy. Someone on the internet said, oh, he's just a money-making nutter, Richard Hall. They didn't know I'd waived copyright on this film. Crackpot it was, not that. Okay, now that's all I'm going to say about the Madeleine documentary. I'm going to move on to other subjects, but I'm going to stay on the theme of puppets. Now, I'm going to show you a clip of Ed Miliband, and what's important in this clip is not what he says, but how many times he says it.
These strikes are wrong at a time when negotiations are still going on, but parents and the public have been let down by both sides because the government has acted in a reckless and provocative manner. After today's disruption, I urge both sides to put aside the rhetoric, get around the negotiating table and stop it happening again.
I listened to your speech in Rex and you talked about the Labour Party being a movement. A lot of people in that movement are people who are on strike today, and they'll be looking at you and thinking, well, you're describing these strikes as wrong. Why aren't we giving us more leadership as a leader of the Labour movement?
At a time when negotiations are still going on, I do believe these strikes are wrong. And that's why I say both sides should, after today's disruption, get around the negotiating table, put aside the rhetoric, and sort the problem out. Because the public and parents have been let down by both sides. The government's acted in a reckless and provocative manner.
Well, Dr. Francis Moore came here and the tone he was striking was a very conciliatory one. Do you think there's a difference between the words they're saying in public and the attitude they're striking in private in these negotiations? Are there negotiations in good faith, would you say?
What I say is that the strikes are wrong when negotiations are still going on, but the government has acted in a reckless and provocative manner in the way it's gone about these issues. After today's disruption, I urge both sides to get around the negotiating table, put aside the rhetoric, and stop this kind of thing happening again.
It's a statement you've made publicly, you'll know to me, and this will be broadcast obviously, but have you spoken privately to any union leaders and expressed your view to them on a personal level?
What I say in public and in private to everybody involved in this is get around the negotiating table, put aside the rhetoric, and stop this kind of action happening again. These strikes are wrong because negotiations are still going on, but parents and the public have been let down by the government as well, who've acted in a reckless and provocative manner.
You're a parent, I'm a parent, other people watch this with parents. Has it affected you personally, this action? Has it affected your family or friends? I mean, and what is the next effect of that going to be on parents? And you take it out, what is that?
I think parents up and down the country have been affected by this action. And it's wrong at a time when negotiations are still going on. Parents have been let down by both sides because the government has acted in a reckless and provocative manner. I think that both sides should, after today's disruption, get around the negotiating table,
Put aside the rhetoric and stop this thing happening again. 5 times he said almost exactly the same thing. Now, what can we say about that? Well, firstly, we can say that those words must have been scripted in order to repeat them 5 times over and learned. So I would ask the question, who has scripted them? If someone else has scripted them for him, that's proof that he is an absolute puppet. But let's just say that he scripted them. Is that leadership? You go into an interview on a fairly minor domestic issue of strikes, and you're so incompetent that you have to write those things down and stick to them. That's not statesman. It's a puppet. In my opinion, the likes of Ed Miliband and Cameron is the same, Theresa May is the same, William Hague, they're all the same, they're all puppets. We should not be entering into any dialogue on policy with them. The only thing that we should be saying to the likes of Miliband is, take me to your leader. That's the only thing we should be talking to them, because they are not the leaders. Right? And this is what should be exposed about our politics. The leaders are not being put on show, they're hiding. They are cowards. Now the same cowards, in my opinion, are running a psychological subversion campaign and have been for a long time. And I come to this conclusion because I've looked at the work of Yewtree. Now Bezmenov was a KGB agent who defected to the West in the 1980s, and he spoke about how in Soviet Russia they were using various subversion techniques, demoralization and destabilization, and try and make people feel isolated so they don't know where to turn. And it's just a way of keeping the public under control and keeping them dependent on the government. Or in the Western case, I would say the government and corporations. And this is one of Yewtree Bezmenov's subversion charts, and I'm just going to list a few things on here because you can pick out things on this list that are happening in the UK today. For example, in the area of education, he says, create permissiveness, which is a lack of rules, resulting in ignorance. And he says things like, discourage the study of real subjects like maths and physics, and concentrate on more woolly subjects that don't teach people how to critically analyse things. In the media, monopolise and manipulate it to create an uninformed myopia. Myopia meaning that you're short-sighted, you can't see the big picture. Madeleine McCann case illustrates that very clearly, that the media has been monopolised and manipulated to create an uninformed myopia. No one knows the facts, or very few people know the facts about the Madeleine McCann case, even though we've had thousands of front-page headlines. In culture, create false heroes and role models, like pop idol and Premier League footballers. Now, I'm going to talk about the area of family and society, because I find this very disturbing, and I do think there is an agenda to break up families and to break up society, to leave people isolated, and then it just makes the public far less, it makes them impotent. They can't oppose the regime, and they can't oppose decisions being made behind the scenes. And create no loyalty within families and within friends. So your loyalty becomes to the state. Now, so just imagine society is this wall. We are all a brick, each individual person, so there's you. So in Soviet Union, this is what they were trying to do. They were trying to make people feel isolated, demoralize them. And a strategy that I think that they are using in our media, in particular in the media, is they're identifying certain groups within society and then making the rest of society detest those groups in the media, and then that then causes fracture between the two groups, thus dumbing down the population. So the example that I gave was, I'm going to show the same clip that I showed in my last talk, but let's just say all these green blocks are people on benefits. Ask the question, how would we psychologically make everyone detest someone on benefits? Yeah? So this is how I think they're doing it.
Julie and Vinny, bienvenue, are also experts on life on the door. I need a bit. These newlyweds are part of Britain's record number of long-term unemployed. No work for more than 6 years, and their only hard graft is working the system.
People find it easy to live off the government because they get most of the things paid for them. And yeah, it's easy doing that. And then you got people that don't want to work. I can't be asked, and they find it easy to claim benefit, and I don't know how they justify that. I am in that position, yeah. I'll hold my hands up, yeah.
At the end of the day, you'd be better off going for the VIP one because it's included.
Julie and Vinny want more. Julie gets sickness benefit, 310 quid a fortnight. All of Vinny and Julie's 9 children are living on benefits. They're the next welfare generation. Julie has to ring up the door office to check just how much cash they've got coming in.
Can you possibly tell me how much will be going into my bank, please?
And with unexpected cash in the bank, it's time to spend.
Thanks for getting money out.
But they spend more on fags and their TV package than they do on food and other basics. Housing benefit is one of the largest chunks of Britain's welfare bill. Vinny has secured the new home they wanted in the space of just a few days. Julie hasn't had a job for 6 years, but the future's bright for Julie and Vinny in Liverpool. It's an arrangement that somehow gets them more benefits. And the cable TV man is back. So, spirits are high. Short of getting a job, life couldn't be rosier.
They're highly effective, these documentaries, because you've just got to go online after they air and read people's comments, spitting poison at people on benefits. And just this proves to me that subversion is at play, because this is the advert that Channel 5 used to recruit people for that documentary. Channel 5 is making a new documentary series looking at what life is really like when you're on benefits. We're offering individuals and families the opportunity to speak about their personal experiences. Do you struggle to survive? Are there no jobs in your hometown? Do you think the system is generous enough? So where does it say, are you on benefits and proud? So they would not have told that couple that this is the title of the documentary. They would have had no clue that that was the whole purpose of that documentary. So they're being duped. And you've just got to go to your news agents any random day. This was just from a couple of days ago. They've got, I blow my benefits on baby spray tans. So this is not genuine expose of people who are sort of abusing their benefits. It's been done for other psychological purposes to cause fractures within society. So if anyone's short on any toilet paper, you can get this. Alright, now, so I wanted to find out what other programs people find subversive, so I put this appeal out on the TV show.
I'm starting a Richplanet league table of the most subversive shows on television. So if you want to suggest which programs you think are being subversive and why, please go to this link where you can post your suggestion and tell me which TV program you think is the most deviously manipulative on television. I will then compile a league table of TV shows which are considered by viewers to be the most dangerous to the mind and being used to subvert. If you need some advice on where to start, why not try Channel 5's documentaries, which are a cesspit of half-truths and use highly selective editing to present blatantly orchestrated, semi-fictional narratives as some kind of real-life documentary. I'd rather watch CAC.
Right, so I got about 100 responses to that appeal, and here's the results. BBC News are at the top, can you believe it?
Yeah, it will be.
10 votes. Okay, so I got quite a lot of feedback on this, and I'm just going to read out some of the viewers' comments. These are not my comments, these are Richplanet viewers. I can vouch for the demoralising effect it has on me. Often overhearing only a single sentence of the horrors bandied so professionally on a BBC News programme is enough to sink my mood, sometimes for the day. It goes without saying that BBC One News is the worst bit of behavioural nudging in a single programme. BBC News is the most corrupt and subversive broadcast in the world. EastEnders, like having an open sewer in your living room. EastEnders is stuffed with social engineering. I used to watch it, then after a couple of years saw it again. Baby being taken from young mother, married men acting like horny schoolboys. It demoralises the population to make them think that this is how most people live, or the younger generation, to implant the belief that security and stability aren't part of the family anymore. EastEnders is part of a mind control programme to lower the mental ability and standard of social behaviour of the mass British public. EastEnders seems to glorify and normalise criminality, family breakup, selfishness and general sluggish behaviour in a way that I have not seen in previous shows. EastEnders is where it all started to change, and I have no doubt that the now deplorable BBC is complicit in the deliberate subversion of society. The BBC as a whole now seems to be a massive and expensive instrument of mind control. Coronation Street was quite light and fun in the 1980s, but then seemed to turn nasty as well. The millions of people who watch this sort of dribble are being suddenly mind controlled over decades to accept the sorts of behaviour which in the long term can only be detrimental to society as a whole. And due to early evening scheduling, children have grown up thinking this sort of thing is normal. Alright, now Emmerdale is sort about a small yet completely amoral population in North Yorkshire. It makes the Wicker Man look like the Archer. Watch the Wicker Man if you haven't seen it. It's good fun. Theft, drug dealing, drug taking and carjacking are all pardonable for our heroes. It is shown at 7 PM when, I say children, not kids, children are having their tea. Not good role models. Like many people, I used to be young, but it would have been much more fun if only I had moved to Emmerdale. Still, I suppose I would have been safer on Elm Street, as I left out all the murders and psycho serial killers they have there. So soaps in general, traditional family unit is no more, dysfunctional relationships seem to be the norm. Violence, sexual innuendo, all designed to confuse young people's minds. EastEnders, Corrie and all the other soaps have a cancer victim or two. Are we being prepared for something, a new norm perhaps, where everyone knows someone with cancer? I try not to watch the soaps, Richard, but she never has them off. We'll touch on that a bit later. So I am forced to see and hear them. It may just be coincidence that all the soap actors are riddled with cancer at the same time, but I highly doubt it. Because I've heard some people say that I think it's the law of attraction, where if you constantly think about something, then you can, to a degree, determine your own future. So if you're constantly watching people with cancer and thinking about it, then perhaps it can increase your chances of getting cancer. I don't know if that's true, but why have they got all these cancer victims in these soap operas? Is that really what you want to come in from work or whatever you do and watch? Question time. This would have been my top choice. The questions are rigged. These are Richplanet viewers' comments. After attempting to watch Question Time for the first time in a while, last night's show put an end to it for me. It's a blatantly controlled format, even down to the fixed questions and the fact the audience members need to apply to attend. I would say that the most subversive programme is Question Time, and particularly because it is hosted by David Dimbleby, one person who I would guarantee is on a second payroll. So the viewer is suggesting that Dimbleby's worked for MI5. And we do know that Jon Snow was offered a second salary by MI5. So they do try and recruit the key anchormen on television. So I would say it's odds on that Dimbleby is an MI5 asset. Some questions are not allowed and some speakers are kicked out. Top of the list, BBC Question Time. In my opinion, all the people in the audience are pre-selected to ask questions. It sticks out of the mouth. So they're saying not just the person who reads the question out from the card at the beginning of the debate. They're saying there's planted people in the audience. Now, at the beginning of 2013, Question Time discussed the issue of fracking in Blackburn. And there's been a lot of negative feeling towards fracking in Blackburn because I think it has been effective. If you don't know what it is, it's a technique by which they can get gas from deep underground, sending high pressure water and sand in order to fracture the rock. And a lot of people, a lot of environmentalists are up in arms about it because they think it's going to damage the water table and pollute the environment and that kind of thing. And I wrote to my MP telling him that they should not be introducing fracking into the UK. So I'm against fracking. Now I'm going to show you a clip from this debate in a second, which I think is orchestrated. But I think we're being told a bit of a fib. about this issue. I'm going to explain why. The only organisation which has produced figures stating that there's all this gas under the UK is the British Geological Survey, who are effectively a government department. Now, the British Geological Survey in 1974, or after 1974, they put out disinformation on one particular issue because there was something crash-landed in the Berwyn Mountains, and the evidence that something crash-landed is very, very strong. It's all in my film, The Berwyn UFO Cover-Up. I don't know if it was a UFO, I don't know what. Something crash-landed there, the military were on top of it very, very quickly, and they took it away. British Geological Survey wrote a report stating that that was the tremor that everyone heard, thousands of people had heard, all their houses were shook. In order to pacify the public, they wrote this report saying that there'd been an earthquake, and they hadn't. They definitely hadn't. Right? So the BGS has been used to put out disinformation, that's the point. And they're an arm of government, they're not an independent research organisation. So they came out in 2013 saying that there's between 1,300 and 1,600 trillion cubic feet of shale gas under the UK, when their pre-2013 estimate was just this. I'll have to magnify that up, 5.3 trillion cubic feet. So it's jumped from 4 months supply to 140 years. Now, I've spoken to a very switched on geologist about this. The first thing he said was, these figures are based on being able to get 10% out of all the gas that's there, right? He said, no way. You're lucky if you get 1% out of what is there. And he also questioned the total estimate as well, right? So, in my opinion, until another organisation does sampling all around the UK and produces evidence of that sampling, I don't actually believe this. I think that's a cock and bull story. Right? Now, so I've been pondering over this question for quite a while now. Why might the amount of realistically extractable gas be being grossly exaggerated? Because I don't think gas extracted from shale gas can change the energy mix of Britain substantially. I don't think it. They're saying that, no, this is going to provide all the problems to our energy solutions. I don't buy that at all. I think they're exaggerating it. And I think the argument, the two sides, the anti-fracking brigade, where they're blocking roads into certain sites. I mean, they are fracking at certain sites around the UK, but has anyone seen any figures of actually how much gas is coming out of those sites? Very little. So I think that the argument is what's convincing people that there's gas there. Yeah? Well, the tension, as I call it. It's two people are arguing about something which isn't true, convinces you that it is true. Now, in my last talk, I suggested that this might be being done in order to create an investment pool, so to get loads of people to invest in it, and then in 5 years' time they announce there was no gas, and they steal everyone's money. But I have been contacted by someone else who suggested it's possibly to do with currency wars. Now, it's a bit of a complex subject to get into, but one point is that it's possible to back currency with energy or gold, that kind of thing. So you could, in theory, have a gas-backed pound. It would be possible for them to strengthen sterling by linking it to gas. So your pound could be exchanged for gas that's allegedly under the UK. So let's just say they did that, and then announced in 5 years' time that, oh, we were wrong, there's no gas. Great way of sinking the pound and taking Britain into the euro, because I don't think they'll get a vote. I don't think people in Great Britain will vote for the euro. But that would be a way of doing it. So that's just theory. I might be miles out. So anyone else got a theory on that, I'd be interested to know. But I think the whole debate about fracking, and it's been pumped up on both sides, people in the truth movement are pumping up the anti-fracking debate.
Why can't communities affected by fracking have blocking powers as those offered to those near wind farms?
Yes, so for people still confused about what fracking is, the word actually comes from fracturing rock, and it's pouring water and sand and chemicals into rock and then producing gas from it. And you remember there was a great scare about whether this would cause earthquakes.
Okay, so the debate goes on, and it's the end bit that I think is being manipulated in this debate. He said two people, one in front of the other, so he knows there's three people with their hands up in the audience. There's a woman over here and two guys. He says, I'm going to have you first, then I'm going to ask you, and then he asks, so there's only the 3 people with their hands all speak.
I go from the back first, that's you, and then I come to in front, yes.
We need to take some tough decisions now on what we have as our future energy mix, because if we don't, we're going to have power cuts, we're going to have blackouts in the future, so we need to make those decisions now, rather than waiting, another 20 years before starting.
Are you in favour of fracking?
I'm in favour of a large mix of different energy sources.
Now first, that's not a question. Is that the kind of question you would ask if you went to question time? I think we need a large mix of energy sources. I think that's a contextual comment as a setup for the next 2, which is going to give you the pro and anti.
And you, sir?
The northwest of England is obviously struggling really, really bad with this recession. This fracking is
to randomly find someone in Blackburn who's going to give the pro fracking voice in that audience is highly unlikely.
A lot of jobs into the area. It's going to give us security for a great number of years. The estimate is that it's going to be about 6 or 7 trillion cubic feet of gas that we need to get it out. We need the money in the northwest of England.
You're objecting to that. What are you saying?
Absolutely. It's not bringing jobs in. There's been 4 wells fracked in the file. 2 have failed. No inquiry. Why they failed? No fines. No regulations. And I believe the HSE has never been to these sites for 2 years. There's terrible things happening in America, in Australia, in Canada. We've had people over telling us about what they've had. People are breathing these gases in. There's all these chemicals are in the ground.
Can anyone remember anyone in the 9/11 truth movement being given that much voice and question time?
Well, they're coming out. We've got to have proper regulation.
Well, I quite agree there does need to be regulation, and there does need to be a look at the safety implications, but we cannot afford as a country, we can't afford it, we certainly can't afford as a country to reject this opportunity. I think we've got to look to see if we can make it work. It has made such a huge difference to the ability to get out of
it's already gone wrong. So you're on the mind that not only you can't, I think, because I
It's gone wrong.
Anyone speak about this? I think that local people are the only people who can stop these things. Look at all the lies that they were told in the 1950s about nuclear power stations. Now people riddled with cancer and all sorts of horrible diseases. They'll lie and lie and lie to you, and you're the only people who can stop it.
Just look at Dimbleby. I think he knows.
Why fracking is we're going to be much more careful about it here than in America, where I agree it is having some beneficial effect, is we are a much smaller and much more heavily populated country, and in America they can do it well away from population centres. We start doing it in the northwest, we get it trickling all the way out the back. 1,500 feet away from school.
Exactly. Okay. Well, we've heard the point, and
but we never get. Why are we not getting our voices heard?
Your voice has been heard by over 3, maybe 3.5 million people right now, and I'm grateful to say
do something.
Well, I can't do anything, but you're in contact. I'll tell you something tonight. We're going to be in Edinburgh next week.
The argument. Just think of 7/7 and 9/11. We've not had any voices in mainstream, so why are they letting that voice in? Okay, let's move on to some other programs. Daytime chat shows. We've got programs like The One Show often have little tidbits of false info that offer an extremely narrow viewpoint with little or no other alternative view. They will often frown upon any alternative views and gesture that these views are obviously stupid and incorrect. So we've got Breakfast TV, Jeremy Kyle, Loose Women. You all watch that? No one prepared to admit it. Jeremy Kyle, well, that goes without saying. Diet and cookery programs, another massive issue. Diet being used to subvert the masses. I think it is. MasterChef, the music and general presentation promotes a feeling of submission and is used in a trance-like state. And if we just look at Ewan Besmanoff's subversion chart, in the area of health, promote junk food to create enfeebled masses. Because enfeebled masses can't pose decisions being made by governments. And I just want to give one example of Greggs, the rise of Greggs the bakers. Anyone noticed that? I mean, has anyone noticed that if you're on the motorway, Highways Agency, the blue motorway signs, they've got the logo of Greggs? Now that has to be approved by government for them to be able to change motorway signs. When I did my driving test many years ago, when I was swatting up on the highway code, I'm sure they didn't have Greggs logos on those blue motorway signs. They definitely didn't. And in Newcastle, where all the pubs are, where everyone goes drinking, there's a Greggs in the middle of all the... It's open till 2 in the morning. Yeah. They even have a bouncer. He's about 25 stone. So I think companies like Greggs are being given a leg up. Now, if you spoke to the managing director of Greggs, he would just say, oh, well, we're just really good at marketing. That's how we've got cafes outside Greggs now. Yeah? I mean, Greggs is junk food in disguise. It's disguised with the other bit of lettuce and tomato, isn't it? But it is junk food, Greggs. There's no doubt about it. And I don't think that their success is purely down to marketing. Because I think the manipulators that I was talking about earlier, the money is just a means to an end for them. They're not interested in money. They've got infinite amount of money because they control the central banks. But they will allow companies like Greggs and McDonald's and others to be top of the shop because they want this. They want junk food promoted to make sure that the masses, you don't have enfeebled masses starting revolutions, do you? Okay. Now, Countryfile, another program which seems innocent on the surface. Sunday Tea Time thinly veiled exploitation of Britain's pastoral instincts in order to soften and subvert the mindset, such that concepts like climate change, renewable energy, GMO foods become indoctrinated. Gender 21 will then be much easier for people to accept. Someone has listed Crime Watch as being their subversive choice. This is a still from Crime Watch programme in October last year, and it's a reconstruction of the Madeleine McCann disappearance, where we've got actors playing Kate McCann and Jerry McCann, and they're having their tapas meal, and every 15 minutes one of them puts their knife and fork down and trots off to check on the kids. I don't believe any of that happened. We've only got their word. There's no evidence that suggests that this checking on children happened. We've got their words, and they've stuck together. I don't believe that happened. So again, in my opinion, this is an intelligence-led psychological operation to make you think that Madeleine was abducted. But how much do you think this program cost to make? It's BBC. It's under an hour long. Any guesses? Anyone like to hazard a guess?
500,000.
500,000? And any other guesses?
2 million.
2 million? 1 million. £1 million. Your money. Now, watch my documentary, and I don't expect you to pay for it. You can watch it online in a few weeks' time free of charge, and then watch that and decide yourself who is lying. Because £1 million, and people are calling me a money-making crap pot for wanting to get a few grand back on this. Okay. Now, I haven't mentioned children's programs, which are important, and they do form young people's minds. But there's one at the bottom there. Some guy says, oh, he thinks Peppa Pig is the most subversive program. I didn't even know what it was. So I had to go on the internet and check. It says it targets the very young and impressionable. Its creators are supported by Channel 5 and Nick J, or whatever that is. Nick Jr. Okay, so I went to check out what is this thing called.
I'm Peppa Pig. Is it my YouTube program to watch? This is Mama Pig. I'm so
So, it promotes an attitude towards Daddy is silly, or makes out Daddy is incompetent at most things, primarily from Peppa the daughter. This, I believe, eats at the true foundations of the relationship capabilities of father and daughter. I have had my daughter quote Peppa, belittling me for no reason, but with true conviction. It was teaching her and all little girls that their fathers aren't really that clever, always make mistakes, and generally are not a good choice for advice. It breaks that subconscious connection between father and daughter, splitting families, which is what Yewtree says in his Subversion chart. They're trying to split families up, right? Now just have a look at some clips. Because I did download 3 hours of it and sat in the office and watched it. So yeah. Okay.
Gosh! Daddy Pig, you've had this book out for 10 years!
Naughty, Daddy!
Sorry, Miss Rabbit.
Daddy, we don't want to get lost.
Are we lost?
Yes. Well, I can run as far as you like.
But Daddy, you can hardly run at all.
And you must remember to bring your book back too, Daddy Pig.
I'll make sure Daddy remembers.
What if I practice eating today, then practice running tomorrow?
No, Daddy, you need to practice running now. See, Daddy, that's just a drawing. Poor Daddy, having to go to work.
Oh, poor Daddy.
Come on, let's play. We've lost our engine.
Lost your engine?
Yes, it's completely disappeared.
I'd like to help, but I don't know a thing about engines. I'm probably just being silly, but this looks a bit like an engine.
Yes. Where shall I put Delphine's luggage?
In my room, at the very top of the house.
Oh. Did you get the envelope?
He can't hear you, Daddy. He's on television.
Oh, yes, of course.
It's a walkie-talkie, Snowman. It's just Daddy.
So apparently this has sold 7.5 million DVDs in the UK and is shown in 180 countries, and it's aimed at 3-year-olds, preschool. So the chap who's contacted me is clearly concerned by it. It's affected his life. So I asked the question, is that content in there deliberately for purposes of subversion? I think it's likely. Think about how many young people's minds that is manipulating. Okay. Right, now we'll come on to Operation Yewtree. Now, I don't know whether Operation Yewtree was a genuine attempt to arrest and charge genuine abusers, or whether it was some kind of psychological operation. But what the mainstream media have done with this story is, in my opinion, they've used it for purposes of demoralization and subversion. Because regardless of the truth of the stories, this was all over our mainstream media. And the thing that this story puts out, here's the message of what this puts out. You can't trust anyone now. Even Rolf Harris. You can't trust anyone. So when I showed you the picture of that wall of society, we're all bricks in society, the cement in that wall is trust. Society relies on trust. In families, in friends, in clubs, whatever, your life at work, it relies on trust. This kind of story breaks down that trust, and all the other subversive practices that I've just been talking about breaks down trust. So there may be some truth in it, but I disapprove of the way that the media handle it and use it to break down trust in society. Alright, now I'm going to talk about a psychological operation now, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. I want you to try and guess. I'm going to creep up on the problem from behind and try and expose it from a different angle to what other people have been trying to expose it. So if you think you know what I'm talking about, shout it out. I'll give you a free copy of the latest DVD. Okay, so I spoke about the empire which is currently gobbling up more and more countries in the world into what ultimately they're trying to make into a one world government. And they've used 9/11 and 7/7 false flag events in order to take over various parts of the Middle East. And I showed this map. After 9/11, they invaded Afghanistan, they invaded Iraq. Several years later, there was regime change in Libya, and various other countries have had knock-on regime change, which I think was orchestrated by Asian provocateurs from Western intelligence agencies. I don't think they were genuine revolutions of people deposing their leaders. So all of the countries we can mark in red that have had some sort of regime change and become westernized since 9/11. I then mark countries which they didn't need to westernize because they're already subservient to the US. So Saudi and Turkey will be two examples. The remaining countries which are targeted are Syria and Iran. Last year our government voted to invade Syria with weapons and kill innocent people there, a country that we've got nothing to do with. We've got no right to invade that country, yet they voted on it, and it very, very narrowly they voted against it. So Syria is undoubtedly a target, Iran is a target because of the rhetoric about its alleged nuclear program, and Pakistan because they're dropping drones on Pakistan. So those countries are targeted. Now, I'm just going to look at if we study this and look at modus operandi of the group which is undoubtedly planning this action. It's quite a long-term plan, I think. First, the types of country that they're going after have a low US approval rating, they're Islamic, and they're considered by us to be undemocratic or dictatorships. So that's the types of countries. But they've always manufactured an excuse in order to go into them. And I'm going to list some of the excuses that they've used in order to regime change this region. In Afghanistan it was 9/11, that was the excuse they used to go in there. In Iraq it was weapons of mass destruction, remember the dodgy dossier. In Libya, Lockerbie, there's no evidence that Libya had anything to do with Lockerbie. In Syria, they're trying to say that Assad has used chemical weapons on his people, and in Iran it's nuclear weapons. So they always manufacture an excuse, and these are the types of countries they're going after. That's their modus operandi. Now let's just say that this group, which is moving towards one world government, and I just want to make one final point about this. Some people look at this and say, oh, isn't this great? We're bringing democracy to the world. That's what they say. We're bringing democracy to the world. Do people really think that's the group that's doing this is doing it out of the goodness of their heart because they want us all to be democratic? I don't think so. Because if you think about it, if you're living under a dictator, you know that if you speak out against the government, you're going to get punished and you're going to go to prison. You can't speak out against the regime. In the West, we can. But they're using these subversion techniques on people in the West. Most people haven't a clue what's going on. They're too busy watching Pop Idol or Premier League football. They're not political. They're being switched off by diet and all the other subversion techniques. So I think they've realised that someone who thinks they're free is actually easier to control than someone who knows they're not. Yeah? So that's why I think these changes are going about. It's easier to fool people into thinking that they're free and just make them into zombies. Now, let's just go down the premise that the group that's trying to bring about this one world order is going to look at Southeast Asia next. That's the next area they're going to go into. So point number one on my previous chart, I said US approval rating. So let's look at US approval rating for countries in this region. Well, the green represents how many people in that country approve of Obama and the US. So 30% people in Burma approve of the US, but over 60% don't really care. So that country's not a problem. Thailand, 60% approve of the US. Vietnam, 71%. Cambodia, 62%. Philippines, 85%. Malaysia, 34%. And Indonesia, 38%. So that's point one, US approval rating. Let's look at point two. Religion. Which of these countries are Islamic? Malaysia and Indonesia are predominantly Islamic, the rest are Buddhist. I think the Philippines is Roman Catholic. Now let's look at democracy. Which of these countries are democratic and which aren't? You can check it on the Global Democracy Ranking League there. I mean, I don't know how they come to these conclusions, but God knows. But we look here that Britain is, UK is 10th, and we've got the very bottom is Malaysia. So Malaysia is considered a dictatorship. So if this regime is going to take over this part of the world, which country are they going to target? Based on the US approval rating, the lowest rating, Islamic, democratic, non-democratic. It's going to be Malaysia, isn't it? But go back to the modus operandi. They need an excuse. They would need to have an excuse. They can't just invade Malaysia. Now, no one's going to believe that Malaysia has got nuclear weapons, are they? How can we make Malaysia look daft? Yeah. So that guy gets a copy of the DVD. Yeah. Yeah. So the missing flight, Malaysian flight, the 777 craft that supposedly went missing, which didn't go missing. Those craft have got multiple devices on them which report their position, GPS position, back to Rolls-Royce, to Boeing. NORAD and the CIA would undoubtedly know exactly where that airplane was. So in my opinion, this missing aircraft, it's just an attempt to destabilise and just starts to discredit Malaysia. Now, Obama went to visit the Malaysian Prime Minister while that flight was supposedly missing, offering American support, saying, oh, we're helping the Malaysian authorities try and find this missing plane. Yeah, right, Obama. He doesn't know where it is. Of course they know where it is. Does this body language say anything to you, these photographs? I think Obama knows that Malaysia is next on the list. And I read after the events in Ukraine recently, they said that the plane that came down in Ukraine, which was another Malaysian plane, or maybe some people saying it was the same plane, one newspaper said, well, that was Malaysia's fault because they shouldn't be flying that plane over a war zone. So they're trying to make Malaysia look like some kind of tin pot dictatorship. And we've had other negative stories coming out of Malaysia. Anyone remember this one? This is fairly recently. So this guy, Gareth Huntley, goes missing backpacking in the jungle in Malaysia. What does that image say to you? It says to me, Malaysia got some kind of militaristic dictatorship, and we need to be wary about it because things are happening to our good-looking Westerners when they go to that country. That's what that image says to me. And there were stories in the newspaper that, oh, he had his throat slit. But there's no post-mortem evidence that he's had his throat slit that I'm aware of, right? So that, in other words, they're trying to make this thing more gruesome than it was. I mean, obviously, it's tragic, the guy's died. I'm not saying it's not a tragedy, of course it is. But they're trying to use it to demonise Malaysia. And the story that made me laugh, which was in the newspaper just a few weeks ago, is this one. So this guy, mystery of British honeymooner who was being quizzed by police after he disappeared for 2 days in Malaysia, leaving his new bride frantic. So they've gone on a honeymoon, Kuala Lumpur, they've had an argument, he's buggered off for 2 days, and then he's come back with his wife. Boom. That's it. That happened to me once. I didn't get on mail online, right? So he's gone to Kuala Lumpur with his new wife, and he's, probably in Kuala Lumpur thinking, hey, they've had an argument. But look what they've done. Look what they've done in the story. It says, last month the body of Briton Gareth Huntley, 34, from Cricklewood, London, was found in a turtle conservation. So they're attaching the story of a guy dying in the jungle to this guy who's just fallen out with his wife. So it's just any slightest negative story about Malaysia, I think they're using it for demonisation purposes, just to get into the mindset that Malaysia should be, so the public aren't going to protest if military action is at some point suggested against that country. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about freedom of expression because I think there's a bit of jiggery-pokery going on with our laws to do with this. This is the Public Order Act, which was changed recently, because up until February this year, it was illegal to make insulting comments against people. And the police have been using this law to deal with anyone slightly undesirable who might shout out comments to them, right? And freedom of speech groups were really getting annoyed about it. They thought that this law was being abused because an insult to one person would be a compliment to another person. Yeah? So it's not really a good law. One person who got behind this campaign was Ron Atkinson, and he spoke at a little news conference in October 2012 to try and make it legal to be able to insult people, and this is what he said.
My starting point when it comes to the consideration of any issue relating to free speech is my passionate belief that the second most precious thing in life is the right to express yourself freely. The most precious thing in life, I think, is food in your mouth, and the third most precious is a roof over your head. But a fixture for me in the number 2 slot is free expression, just below the need to sustain life itself. That is because I have enjoyed free expression in this country all my professional life and fully expect to continue to do so. So my concerns are less for myself and more for those more vulnerable because of their lower profile. Like the man arrested in Oxford for calling a police force gay. Or the teenager arrested for calling the Church of Scientology a cult. Or the cafe owner arrested for displaying passages from the Bible on a TV screen. When I heard of some of these more ludicrous offences and charges, I remembered that I had been here before in a fictional context. I once did a show called Not the 9 O'Clock News some years ago, and we did a sketch where Griff Rhys-Jones played Constable Savage, a manifestly racist police officer to whom I, as his station commander, is giving a dressing down for arresting a black man on a whole string of ridiculous, trumped up and ludicrous charges. The charges for which Constable Savage arrested Mr. Winston Cadovio of 55 Mercer Road were these: walking on the cracks in the pavement, walking in a loud shirt in a built-up area during the hours of darkness, and one of my favourites, walking around all over the place. He was also arrested for urinating in a public convenience and looking at me in a funny way. Who would have thought that we would end up with a law that would allow life to imitate art so exactly? I read somewhere a defender of the status quo claiming that the fact that the gay horse case was dropped after the arrested man refused to pay the fine, and that the Scientology case was also dropped at some point during the court process, was proof that the law was working well, ignoring the fact that the only reason these cases were dropped was because of the publicity that they had attracted. The police sensed that ridicule was just around the corner and withdrew their actions. But what about the thousands of other cases that did not enjoy the oxygen of publicity, that weren't quite ludicrous enough to attract media attention? Even for those actions that were withdrawn, people were arrested, questioned, taken to court, and then released. That is the law working properly. That is censoriousness of the most intimidating kind, guaranteed to have, as Lord Beer says, a chilling effect on free expression and free protest. Merely stating an alternative point of view to the orthodoxy can be interpreted as insult. A new but intense desire to gag uncomfortable voices of dissent. The best way to increase society's resistance to insulting or offensive speech is to allow a lot more of it.
Now, anyone remember seeing that on the news? Why didn't the mainstream news send their reporters to film that news conference, a very important news conference, because it resulted in the law being changed. And by the way, who would you rather have as Prime Minister? Mr. Bean, exactly, sir. Yeah, Mr. Bean. I mean that with true conviction. Now, so as I said, the law was changed because the House of Lords had a vote on this. They voted 154, quite a large majority, to remove that word insulting, and the government didn't oppose it, because I think if the government had opposed it, they would have looked silly, and they would have had Rowan Atkinson ridiculing them. So the law was changed on the 1st of February 2014. Now, I'm just going to, so Rowan Atkinson, I suspect, was quite instrumental in getting that law changed, yeah? And I don't think the government wanted to change that law because it takes away police powers. It takes away powers of arrest. But they can't arrest people now for shouting things out, right? So what they've done is they've given back some freedom of expression in changing that law. Now I've just written Rowan Atkinson's name down like that because this newspaper headline appeared just 2 months after the law was changed. Now, first point to note about this newspaper headline is this story, the entire front page, other than the picture of Rowan Atkinson, was a fake story, wasn't true. It's the establishment where these rats are supposed to have been discovered complained and said, well, there is no rats. So that was completely fabricated. So why would you put a totally fabricated story on the front page of the newspaper? What that tells me is that has been put there to match that, to go with Rowan Atkinson. And I think there's a subliminal there, Rowan Atkinson. So, in my opinion, this is a subliminal to just nudge the public to start disliking Rowan Atkinson. Because I think, if you think about it, imagine Rowan Atkinson and Ed Miliband in a debate. Ed Miliband, the robot, just reading the same thing out over and over. There would be no competition. They don't want people who have got genuine statesman-like qualities upstaging their puppets. It would undermine their whole programme of having puppets in place. So someone like Rowan Atkinson, someone as intelligent and witty as Rowan Atkinson, Mr. Bean. They don't want Mr. Bean undermining their political system. I mean, can you believe it? So, in my opinion, this is a genuine demonisation attempt. Why do they do it there? Well, if you think of our news, our mainstream news, it has become more channels. Yeah? So if you go on Sky News, you get 15 channels or whatever. But newspapers, that's not the same. Because if 1 million people buy that, I would estimate 10 million people will cast their eye on it. So print media is somewhere where the front page at least still has tens of millions of eyes on it. And you can buy that story, including the subliminal element of it, without even buying the newspaper. That's why they have them in garage forecourts and in Tesco's and on display when you go in, because they're being used to plant subliminal messages. Here's another one. So in this story, this is the Financial Services Authority got an advert. Why they would need to have an advert, a government organisation, and they just so happen to put a big banner on the top of their advert saying the truth, and it's right under where we've got a caption saying missing Madeleine and Mum Kate. I don't think that's an accident. Now, after they've given us the freedom to insult each other, right? So they've taken away some police powers with that law. Not long after that, 21st November 2013, these bogus stories about modern slavery started to appear in our media, right? And I think that they're a Hegelian dialectic. They've been placed in our media because they want to bring in a new law to remove some of our freedoms. And I reported on these stories when they occurred last year.
One story caught my eye as a classic, contrived Hegelian dialectic problem-reaction-solution farce. The story of 3 women rescued from a house in Lambeth after allegedly being held as slaves for 30 years. This story was put out by most, if not all, of our gutter press. The BBC website said a Malaysian woman, 69, an Irish woman, 57, and a Briton, 30, were rescued on the 25th of October. It emerged on Thursday. A man, 73, and a woman, 67, understood to be married, were arrested in Lambeth and later bailed until January. The Home Secretary, Theresa May, said details were still emerging in Lambeth, South London, but it was clear that many other victims were hidden in plain sight across the country. It transpired that one of these so-called slaves had been working, wait for it, drum roll, in a nail bar. I'm enslaved in a nail bar, please let me out. I can assure you a nail bar is not the sort of place I would want to be enslaved in either. I spent 30 years in prison against my will. Oh really? Where did you do your time? Wandsworth nail bar. Really, the screws are really cruel in them nail bars. They only allow 5-minute fab breaks, and you have to stick to set fingernail designs. There was just no artistic freedom there. If a person abuses another person, do we not already have laws that deal with this? Theresa May then starts going on saying that we need to deal with modern day slavery by inventing new laws. Thousands of Geordie men will be getting locked up for being heard to utter the forbidden words. Make me a cup of tea, pet. I then saw psychologists being interviewed talking about how charismatic people with strong personalities can start cults with the aim of enslaving people and how we need to protect ourselves against them. So that's what this is all about. Controlling people who spread ideology, or perhaps even the truth. This farcical story shows just how scared the manipulators are of certain ideas which are growing in the public mindset. Ideas that are based on truth. That's it, the truth is the greatest enemy of the state, and this applies to the UK right here, right now. New laws to clamp down on modern day slavery are being laid down to stamp out the enemy of the state, the truth.
So, a couple of ridiculous stories planted in the mainstream media, a little bit of reaction from Theresa May and other politicians, and then in June this year, we got the Queen's
A
speech.
bill will be introduced to strengthen the powers to prevent modern slavery and human trafficking, while improving support for victims of such crimes.
So the Queen then says in her speech that the next sitting Parliament are going to bring in a law. So that tells me that this conspiracy involves the Crown, people who manipulate the government and the media, all in one. The people who are doing this have got tentacles into all of those organisations, right? Now, just to press home the point, we already have employment law. We have minimum wage, work conditions. If you set up a company, it's not easy to get all of the, to comply with all of the legislation that you have to when you're considering employees. So what are they talking about when they're talking about modern slavery, right? They don't mean physical slavery, shackling someone up like they did in the Middle Ages or whatever. They mean mental slavery. So they mean what you can say to someone else. That's what they're trying to control, right? Now, I'm going to show you the draft slavery bill that they're going to try and make law, and I'm going to point out why I think it's very dangerous. Now, there are two draft bills at the moment, so these are not law yet. There's the government bill and there's a joint committee bill, and they both try to define slavery in different ways. Now I'm going to look at the joint committee bill first, and I'm going to read it selectively. For the purposes of this Act, slavery means the control by a person of a second person in such a way as by which any person obtains a benefit through the use, management, profit, transfer or disposal of that second person. So if I ask anyone in this audience to give you some money, to go and get me a pint at the bar, and you go and do it, I've just committed an offence according to that law. Right? If you don't think that, I actually ran the slavery hotline, because they're setting up hotlines that you can ring and report slavery. So I rang it up, and it took them a week to ring me back. And I said, well, if I ask someone to buy me a bag of crisps in the shop and they go and do it, then I've broken the law then. She said, yeah, that's right. Under the new legislation, that is correct. So neither of these two definitions of slavery consider whether the person has agreed to perform an act. You see what I mean? So the second one isn't quite, sorry, the first one isn't quite as bad. It says P requires another person to perform forced or compulsory labour, and the circumstances are such that P knows or ought to know that the person is being required to perform forced or compulsory labour. So nothing about whether the person performing the labour has agreed or not. Now I can envisage, if this is passed, I can envisage a situation in a few years from now where you might have a married couple or two friends or some sort of club where get along all right, and we do things for each other in our lives, don't we, all the time? So, you've got divorced or whatever, you spit the poison at your partner, and you think, all those favours I did for them. 999. I would like to report my ex-partner for enslaving me to the whole, these are all the things I did. What is that going to break down? Trust, which is what I was talking about earlier. Trust is the glue which bonds society together. You're going to be scared of asking anyone to do any favour if that law comes in. For example, 2012 I launched a campaign, Tell Your MP About 7/7, and about 100 people printed out the documents from our website and went to their MP. I could get locked up for that if this law is passed. I'm enslaving them. Right? Now, I was going to ask everyone in this audience to write to your MP to complain about this, but I'm a bit worried about it now. Do it before they pass the law, obviously. But what they've done, they've given us the right to insult one another, and then they've taken away the right for you to ask someone to do a favour for you. This all ties in my opinion, to what I was showing you about the television, and how they're trying to just clamp down, dumb us down. Right, censorship of Richplanet TV. As you might know, I got kicked off air. This is the Ofcom report. Now what I'm going to do is, Ofcom listed all of the sections in my TV show that they said were insulting or offensive or what have you. So I've edited them all together and show you why I got kicked off TV. Due to one complaint. One complaint launched an investigation, and then the TV channel then got 400 complaints, wanting the programme back on. Anyway, this is it.
One important factor is there is no photograph or video showing a decapitated corpse. We can see a body lying in the road, but it's not obvious whether there's even a head there or not. We didn't.
Right, so it's supposed to believe that in that corner of the pavement with trees overhead, they're trying to hack his head off. They've suddenly got out and meat killing, trying to hack his head off.
So this is off the road they've tried to do.
Yeah, on the pavement. Right. Now that would have, about 8 pints of blood would have spurted out if they'd done that. They'd blood all over themselves, but didn't know. And the important thing is there's no blood on the pavement. You hack down a meat cleaver, you get out, you hack his head off. Why would you want to do that? And you then drag him out in the middle of the road. It makes absolutely no sense. The only sense it makes is a stage prop for public horror. Right? So just ask yourself, if you had seen somebody hack someone's head off and got blood all over his hands with a meat cleaver, would you stand there a few feet in front of him with a camera photographing him and talking to him? Would you do it? Of course you would. So that is an obvious statement, and the dead giveaway here is a little old lady with a shopping trolley who walks past, totally unconcerned, as this apparent horror event is going on. And that tells you that red blood on the hand was photoshopped on. There was no red blood on the hands, and it's only on the hands, not anyone else in his clothing, as would have happened if
right, so they've done a very badly orchestrated false flag event in Boston. Now they've done one in Woolwich in the UK. This to you that you've got the people who do see through these lies, okay, such as yourself, people who actually critically analyse, look at the evidence and see if there's any mileage in what the mainstream is saying, and then unpick it, and then we know it's all a fake event, okay, it's easy to see.
We could argue all day as to whether that was offensive or not, but the point is, I would have been quite happy the following week to just make an apology and then continue in the same vein exposing all of the things that I am. But it's not as simple as that, because this has had a permanent detrimental effect to my freedom of speech, because the TV company are no longer happy putting any content from me which challenges authority. So if I'm accusing any authority of corruption or what have you, they will not throw any sort of false flag stuff, 9/11 in the Ukraine, all of that. No, we don't want that. UFOs and aliens, Richard, that's all we want, because we're worried about getting a 30 grand fine, and we're worried about getting our license taken off of us. Not only that, they put me on after 12 o'clock, they wanted to put me on late as well, so people have had problems recording the show. They also wanted more money off me. So the last series of 13 programmes, they want £3,000 plus VAT off me. They don't pay me to make these TV shows. I pay them £3 grand for a 13-week series for them to broadcast it. So what I've done is, in order to fund the last series, I said to them, well, okay, if I give you 30% of my tour sales, i.e. what you've paid today, that will amount to round about the £3 grand for the whole tour. Right, so I'm subsidising a TV show to pay for this with these tour sales. So they're making it very difficult for me. I can't put most of the content from today, they probably wouldn't put on TV because they're worried about losing their licence. And this is, so Ofcom have only flexed its muscles a little bit with that, but it's completely silenced my voice, at least on television. And the internet's another story, which I'm not going to go into today. Okay, now a lot of people ask me, what can you do? What can one do about this sort of subversive influence that is trying to erode our lives? Well, here's one suggestion. Yeah. Throw your television set out the window. Now, I've thought about this, and I'm going to give you a few pointers before we go for the break. The first, well, this sounds a little bit religious. It's not meant to. Your armor or your guidance against subversion comes from within yourself, not from outside. You're not going to get it from any person or anything. It's going to come from within you. That's where you get your guidance. Know or learn which influences to cut off from. So write them down and write a plan as to how you are going to deal with these influences. And think carefully about what you put value on. For example, if you don't have your health, you've really got nothing. And in the Peppa Pig programs, there's very much emphasis on saying that nature is crap, that Peppa doesn't like going to the park and this kind of thing. And I think that there's an agenda behind that, to make people worship material things rather than things of nature. Don't spend long periods under subversive influence. I only watch the TV or the news for maybe 10 or 15 minutes a week just to see what propaganda they're putting on. Don't sit there for hours in front of it. Give the influences labels which describe what they really are. Dancing on shite. I call Greg's dregs. And other such names. Now, I touched on this before in an earlier slide. It's not as simple as that, is it? And it's not always the woman who's addicted to the subversive influences. Sometimes it's the man, and sometimes it's the woman who, or sometimes it might be a teenager, or might be a grandparent. Whatever situation that you have, there may be another person in your life who loves it all and can't get enough of that and just thinks you're absolutely bonkers for wanting to deal with these subversive influences. What do you do in that situation? Because a lot of people write to me and ask that question, all right? And it's not easy. But here are some pointers. The first thing you can do, and this comes from cognitive behavioral therapy, which can be used to tackle things. It's not always used for devious purposes, CBT. Write a letter from the person's perspective. So pretend you are your partner and try and convince yourself why you need to watch all of this crap. And we haven't touched on radio and films. I mean, anyone listen to that Jeremy Vine on an afternoon radio too? What a disgusting show that is. Put yourself on trial. So what you do is you put yourself in an imaginary trial where there's a jury and a judge and your partner or whoever it is that you're trying to convince against these subversive influence. What would you say? What evidence would you give them that these influences are no good and need to be gotten rid of? And once you've done that, you'll have an understanding of your partner and you'll have an understanding of yourself. Imagine that they are drowning in a river. Now, if they were drowning in a river, would you point your finger at them and say, stop drowning in that bloody river? Because they are. They're drowning in a river of subversion. You wouldn't criticize them if they were drowning in a river. You would help them out. They need support. They need help. They're victims. It's not their fault. It is the subverter's fault. Right? So you can't criticize. No ticking off. Try and talk to their heart before their head and show compassion. And try and get them, once you have spoken to their heart, to propose a solution, because they're much more likely to follow it. And if the solution isn't suitable for you, you still give them praise for it, because it means that they are at least thinking about it. Alright? And recognise and give gratitude when they give suggestions. Okay, well that's the end of part one, so we'll... Okay, well, carry on. Nice to meet. So just to say or repeat, this documentary is a forensic documentary. As you can see, it's full of evidence, full of the police photographs, circumstantial physical evidence. It's not what you get on Main Street. Okay. In part two, I'm going to talk about the secret space program. I'm going to raise a subject which a lot of people talk about, heard people talking about it today, and that is aeroplane trails. A lot of concern of this. Now, if you know somebody who criticises you or tries to take the mick out of you because you express concern over this subject, what I recommend you do is print out this article, which is from 2002. This is a Guardian article, and I'm going to read a short extract from it. So it's a very long article which is talking about what we were doing with spraying between 1940 and 79. The Ministry of Defence turned large parts of the country into a gigantic laboratory to conduct a series of secret germ warfare tests on the public. The government report just released provides for the first time a comprehensive official history of Britain's biological weapons trials between 1940 and 1979. Many of these tests involved releasing potentially dangerous chemicals and microorganisms over vast swathes of the population without the public being told. While details of subsequent trials have emerged in recent years, the 60-page report reveals information about more than 100 covert experiments. So people who say they don't spray chemicals on the public are lying. 100 covert experiments. The report reveals that military personnel were briefed to tell any inquisitive inquirer the trials were part of research projects into weather and air pollution. Now, but we do have to be careful not to just point up at the sky and claim that they're trying to poison us, because I would contend that the vast majority of aeroplane trails are just condensation trails. So it's a subject which can be easily debunked by when people just point at the sky and don't produce objective evidence. Now, I just want to report on someone who is trying to gather evidence. That's Andrew Johnson. Now, he hasn't come to any firm conclusions yet, but I'm going to just explain what his project is. What he's done, he's got a circuit board called Raspberry Pi, which you can buy for about £35, and he's written some quite sophisticated software for it. He's got a high-definition camera which links into the Raspberry Pi, and he's also got a radio receiver which can receive, it's actually a TV receiver, Freeview TV, USB Freeview receiver, but they can also receive the signals given off by most aircraft. So what he's doing is he's logging every aircraft within a 30-mile radius of his location in a database, and he's taking a photograph of the sky every 30 seconds. He then produces a time-lapse video of the sky of all of the airplane trails in any one particular day, and then he's correlating that with the airplane data. Now, not only that, he's got one of these in his own house, but he's had them at 5 different houses around the UK, because he's got them all connected via the internet, and all of the data from these trackers goes back to one central point. So he's counting the number of planes above the trailing altitude within 25-mile radius of these locations. Now, anyone like to hazard a guess how many aeroplanes pass overhead in any one day within a 25-mile radius in the UK? Typical figure. Anyone like it?
200?
Over 300, 200, 1,000, 4,000. 4,000 is a typical figure that he's getting in his database, and he's got them all logged. And that's planes which give off a signal, because they might give their GPS position, their speed and their height and this kind of thing, but they don't all give off a signal. And this is a bit of a problem with this research. So these are the postcodes where he's had trackers located. This is my house here, NE16 in the northeast there. So I'm just going to let Andrew explain some of his conclusions.
From all the data gathered so far, it seems there is no large difference in ADS-B detectable aircraft on days of high trailing than there are on days of no trailing. The data here does not establish a clear link between levels of aircraft and levels of trailing. Looking at some figures in isolation, it could be argued that there is a lower amount of aircraft on days of trailing. The result, therefore, would tend to disprove the general statement that trailing is seen because of the increased air traffic levels. If that is the case, then it is air traffic which is not detectable in the same way as regular air traffic. Days of trails or no trails. Now, no obvious reason could be observed why trails were seen on some days and not others. Again, taking the November 2013 time-lapse video, it can easily be seen that there are persistent and non-persistent trails appearing in the same periods of time and at the same part of the sky. So this too remains unexplained.
So there are some mysteries to this. One is that you get two aeroplanes at the same altitude, in the same location. One leaves a persistent trail and the other one doesn't. On some days where you get vast amounts of trails, and then other days you get very few. Now what Andrew is trying to find out is there more aircraft that are responsible for those additional trails? So are they putting up additional aircraft and spraying something on those days? And what he's found is that there's aircraft that can be detected via their radio signals. There's not additional aircraft when there's additional trailing. So it still is possible that those trails are being made by additional aircraft, but they're not giving off a signal, because not every aircraft has to give off a signal, and that's the problem. So he's trying to identify whether those additional trails are coming from aircraft that don't give off a signal. So it's still ongoing, and if you want to get involved and help him, because he is looking for other locations to put these trackers, his website is checktheevidence.com. So this is one example of someone who's trying to find objective evidence, which could be put into a court to take the government or whoever to court over this. And if you are going to get involved in this issue, I would suggest that you try and do the same. It's about evidence gathering. We can't just point to the sky and say, hey, they're poisoning us, because that just brings ridicule. You have to think of objective ways to prove what's going on. So I'm going to start with this statement, which is the real problem people don't get their face on mainstream TV. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to use an example, the example of Osama bin Laden. Now, many people in this room will probably realise that Osama bin Laden had nothing to do with 9/11. There's no evidence linking bin Laden to 9/11, and this has been exposed by quite a lot of people. One of those, Bill Cooper, who actually exposed it before 9/11. So this radio clip that I'm going to play you is from June 2009, 3 months before 9/11, and it's Bill Cooper explaining that Osama bin Laden was a creation of the CIA. So he wasn't a real problem person. He was a patsy, right? So this is a very interesting clip, because Bill Cooper was dead 2 months after 9/11. So this is 3 months before 9/11 he's saying this.
Can you believe what you have been seeing on CNN today, ladies and gentlemen? Can you believe it? Supposedly, a CNN reporter found Osama bin Laden, took a television camera crew with him, went into Osama bin Laden's hideout, interviewed him and his top leadership, his top lieutenants and colonels and generals in their hideout. Now, don't you think that's kind of strange, folks? You see, because the largest intelligence apparatus in the world, with the biggest budget in the history of the world, has been looking for Osama bin Laden for years and years and years, and can't find him. The FBI also, under the leadership of Louis Freeh, has been looking for Osama bin Laden for years and years and years and years and years and many years, and can't find him. Some doofus jerk-off reporter with a camera crew walks right into his hideout and interviews him. Now, that tells us two things. Either everyone in the intelligence community and all of the intelligence agencies of the United States government are blithering idiots and incompetent fools, including the entire apparatus of the FBI and all of their personnel, or they're lying to us. They're not looking for him at all. And the second is the truth. You see, the CIA created Osama bin Laden. They recruited him. They trained him. They found his leadership. They brought them all together. They showed him how to fight the Soviet Union in Afghanistan, and when that was over, they still continued to fund him and train him, and they're now using him to help bring about world government by making him the big boogeyman, because they can't use Saddam Hussein anymore. if I were the head of the Central Intelligence Agency, within 2 weeks I would have him dead or in custody without fail, without fail. A reporter from CNN and his little camera crew got into Osama bin Laden's secret hideout and conducted an interview. If you don't believe me, tune into CNN. They're probably running it right now as I'm speaking. And if you believe it, you are one of the stupidest jerks that ever lived on the face of this earth. And whatever is going to happen, if you're going to blame on Osama bin Laden, don't you even believe it.
Right, so the point I'm making is the fact that bin Laden is portrayed on mainstream media is a clue to the fact that he's just a patsy. He's not a real problem person, right? Now the same can be applied, in my opinion, for whistleblowers. Someone who comes out and is giving away government secrets or things that the government don't want in the public domain. Here are two whistleblowers who we've heard a lot about in recent years, Ed Snowden and Julian Assange. And you have to say they've been given hours and hours and hours of mainstream coverage. And I think that puts a huge question mark over both of them. My opinion would be they're both probably CIA assets, and every word that comes out of their mouth is something that they want people to know about. They're not genuine whistleblowers, in my opinion. Here is a genuine whistleblower. You haven't seen Dr. Judy Wood on mainstream TV, have you? Given a fair ride on mainstream TV. Dr. Judy Wood, Professor of Engineering Mechanics, written probably the most important book of the 21st century, Where Do the Towers Go? Which tells you what happened on 9/11. They don't want her on mainstream TV, because she, to them, is a real problem person. Now, I'm going to talk about another whistleblower who also has not been on mainstream TV, who I think we need to be looking very, very closely at, because I suspect he is the real deal, and he's not been on mainstream TV. But before I introduce him, I'm just going to give a statement that when you speak to someone and you say, did you realise that the US are developing these aircraft in secret and they've got phenomenal capabilities? Most people say, well, of course they do. We know that. That's their job. They're protecting us. But if you were to say to that person, well, they've developed craft which are 10 times the size of this room along each side, 600 feet by 600 feet by 600 feet. From a standing start on the Earth, they can get into space in 40 seconds by travelling at Mach 9 vertically or horizontally. They can get to the Moon in 2 hours, on Mars in a few weeks. They've got them parked up on Mars and they've got them parked up on the backside of the Moon. They've traversed the whole solar system. They've got some of them are weaponized and they're in orbit around the Earth. Would you still say, well, it's okay for the US to develop secret craft? I don't think so. But I suspect this is what has happened. This is what is going on in the secret space program. Now, the information comes from somebody called Ed Fouché. Now, Ed Fouché came out in 1998. He's an avionics engineer who worked with various engineers and pilots over a long career in the US Air Force. And he was given information about this triangle that they developed in the 1980s and 1990s. It's called the TR-3B. TR-3B, as I said, 600 feet along each side, and it has this highly sophisticated device in the middle called a plasma accelerator. Now, I'm going to go into some detail on how that is supposed to operate, but essentially what it does is it generates an extremely strong magnetic vortex field around the whole craft, which somehow shields that craft from Earth's gravity and makes the craft a fraction of its actual weight. It also shields it from inertia, so it allows it to perform these 30G changes in direction. Right? As I say, I'm going to come on to the explanation of that. But the first thing I want to point out is that Andrew Johnson interviewed Ed Fouché in February this year. He did about 6 hours of Skype interviews. Right? The information has been available since 1998 when Fouché first came out. It's not really being covered. He had a very brief slot on a mainstream documentary in the 90s on Channel 4, but they kind of played it down. Right? There's been no detailed expose in the mainstream. So Andrew has these 6 hours of Skype conversations with Ed Fouché, and I then interview Andrew about those interviews. And I covered it on a TV show. It was on television a few weeks back, or maybe 6 weeks, something like that. Now, after I put that program out on my website and online, on TV, one person called David Hilton, who we think is a historian of some kind, started trying to debunk Ed Fouché, or he had been trying to debunk Ed Fouché for quite some time. And there's another blogger on the internet called Alien Scientist, who we think has also been trying to discredit Ed Fouché. So they come out with claims that Ed Fouché is a proven liar, and Ed Fouché has forged one of his main documents that he uses to prove that he worked at Area 51. Now you can read this article by Andrew Johnson. It's called The TR3B Trolls and the Truth. It goes into a lot of detail on these two characters that have been trying to discredit Fouché. So there's a big argument going on. And the question you've got to ask is, are the people who are trying to discredit him just genuinely interested and think he's telling fibs about his technology, or are they government agents who've been sent to plug this leak in their secrecy? And if you read this article and you look at how they're actually trying to debunk him, they're saying that this one word was cut and pasted in one of his documents, and that is explained why it is like that. And they said that he's actually caught lying about what his role was. If you look at the video, because what they were doing is they were talking to him on Skype, and they were recording him without his knowledge, and he'd had a drink, and they're trying to sort of coerce him into saying certain things. And it gets very, very sort of scrupulous and messy, but in my opinion, we need to be looking very, very closely at Ed Fouché. So that's just the trolling of what's going on. It's sort of measure, because after I put the program out, you see, people start emailing me saying, well, why are you covering him, Richard? He's a proven liar. He's not a proven liar. And a couple of weeks after my program aired on TV, he was followed by a car with blacked out windows. His car ended up getting written off, and his 2 broken ribs and head injuries. That in itself doesn't prove anything, but I suspect that Fouché's disclosures are genuine. So now let's get on to what is it that Fouché says. As I said, his claims are around the TR3B, this flying triangle. Let's just put that now. I'm going to show you some witnesses of flying triangles, because there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people that have seen 600-foot flying triangles, but generally they're described as black silent triangles. Now, Fouché in 1998 said that they have a quasi-crystal coating, which means that the colour of them can change. It can be any colour. So if it's a blue sky, it could be blue. If it's at night, they can turn them black. And they can also they can change the radar absorptiveness so that they can become invisible to radar. And quasi-crystals in 1998 were not widely known about, but they are now. There's a guy who got the Nobel Prize for researching them. So before I go into the technical details of the TR3B, I'm going to show you some evidence, possibly of the TR3B, in a documentary that I showed last year called Almost Identified Flying Objects, where I interviewed quite a few people who've seen silent black flying triangles.
In 1988, a wave known as the Staffordshire Flap occurred at Cannock Chase. In March 1997, the Sheffield UFO incident took place.
We had 52 flying triangle incidents over Derby.
It took shape. It was a triangle, a big huge triangle with the lights all the way around the edge, and it went over my flat.
What I noticed is it would start rotating like that.
I saw this massive, great big black triangle sitting in there. Right. A huge black triangular object. I realised it was this black triangular shaped object. The size of it is massive, like a great big football. So
it must have been at least a football field in size.
Almost the size of a football pitch. And the size of 3 football pitches.
Just added up. Right. But there were no sound.
I could see that it was a triangle.
It was absolutely massive. And in the centre was a small cluster of red and orange, like honeycomb arrangement of lights.
And there was one red one in the centre.
Light at each corner and a big light in the middle.
Pretty much dead on what I thought, to be honest.
Right. There was at this point that the triangle tilted up in the air, but it rose, like I say, like a submarine in the water. It travelled fast, and more strangely, was completely silent.
That's almost
approximately the size of a football pitch.
And it actually came down in the road and hovered about 10 foot, stood there staring at it.
And that's one approached me today saying that they've seen a black triangle off the coast here in Margate. Now, in 1990, there was a black triangle flap over Belgium, and the Belgian Air Force sent up F-16 fighters in order to try and intercept them. Now, the interesting point about this case is that the radar tapes from those F-16 fighters were given to Belgium's top radar expert, and he examined them, and he said, right, these are genuine objects, they're real physical objects, and their dynamics are incredible. 1991, he was asked by the British Ministry of Defence to come up to the UK and to give them a briefing on the dynamics of these black triangles. And somebody called Harry Harris, who was a friend of mine, a friend of David Caton's, he managed to get an interview with Professor Emil Schweitzer at his hotel, and I suspect that Schweitzer would have been told off for giving that interview. So we're very lucky. It took me a while to get this off David Caton from Harry Harris, but I'm really glad that I managed to get hold of it, because it's indisputable. This is a top academic who's looked at these radar tapes.
Another wave of black triangles appeared in Belgium in 1990.
This is
the Belgian Air Force scrambled F-16 fighters to try and intercept them, but were outmaneuvered every time. After days of activity, the Belgian Air Force had no explanation, and to this day still have no explanation as to the origin of the triangular UFOs. After the events, an investigation was launched, and the airborne radar tapes from the F-16s were given to radar expert Professor Emil Schweitzer. Schweitzer ruled out any form of radar anomaly and concluded the radar systems were tracking real objects. Calculations were carried out on the data, and in one maneuver, the triangular craft turned a sharp corner, resulting in an acceleration of 30 G. That's 30 times greater than the Earth's gravity. This would be impossible for a conventional aircraft, and any occupants would be dead. Incredibly, in 1991, Schweitzer was asked by the British Ministry of Defence to come over to the UK to give British military chiefs a briefing on the movements of this unknown craft and explain the radar data. We know this because Schweitzer himself told researcher Harry Harris when Harris managed to get an interview with him in his hotel whilst in the UK.
What I found by calculations, starting from the data recorded by the pilot, that the UFO made at one point of its trajectory a very strange motion. And during that very strange motion, the normal acceleration was, let's say, about 30 Gs. So the trajectory was, first of all, the UFO was flying almost around, and then suddenly made a 90-degree motion. At that point, where he made a 90-degree turn, that point, the normal acceleration was about 30 Gs. Flying almost vertically, and then descended obliquely to the ground. During the offline descent, the UFO was flying supersonic. Is it reasonable to assume that there couldn't be anything living in that machine that we could, as we understand it? I would say that with the present human technology, is that impossible?
The MOD have never publicly admitted they requested a meeting with Schweitzer.
He said, with present human technology, that would be impossible. I would change that. With present disclosed human technology, that would be impossible. Because my money is on these particular UFOs being some version or other of the TR-3B that Fouché spoke about. That's not to say that I think UFOs don't exist, because I think they do. I just think that a lot of these triangle cases are this covert craft that has been developed by the US Air Force in conjunction with the NSA. Now, I'm going to show you a clip now of Ed Fouché talking in 1998, because that's when he first started making his disclosures. He talks about two satellites or vehicles that have been placed in permanent orbit, that the NSA have got technology that they can fly to and from. So one of the vehicles that they use to get to these two secret satellites is the TR-3B, which I'm going to explain in a minute. And the other is the SR-75 and the SR-74. So these are two conventional type aircraft, or jets. The SR-75 takes off on a runway with the SR-74 piggybacked on top of it, flies to a very high altitude, releases the SR-74, which can then get into space and go to these satellites and then return to the Earth. But the SR-74 can't take off from the ground. So they're using two conventional aircraft to actually get into space. So they don't need a space shuttle or rockets to get into space, but they've not told anyone this. Right? So if you ask NASA, they'll say that's impossible. So he talks about those secret satellites and how the NSA are actually going to and from them.
The NASA space shuttle, I'm here to tell you, is really an antique by comparison. The joke is on us. If you think these rumors are far-fetched, look at the YB-49 and the XB-70, flown in 1948 and 1964, respectively. Now look at the SR-75, which has been spotted numerous times. You say the government can't get people secret? Well, you're wrong. From my sources, 2 new vehicles have been placed in permanent orbit. One of these vehicles is the Space Orbital Nuclear Service Intercept Vehicle, SUNSIV. When you hear it from another reliable source in 10 years, you'll remember this. This codename Locust. The SR-74 and the TR-3B flying triangle can deliver spares, replacement units, service fuels, chemicals, and modules to the SUNSIV, or Locust. The robotic SUNSIV uses deliverables to service, calibrate, repair, and replace parts on the newer NSA, CIA, and NRO Ferret satellites. And I know for a fact that they were developing robotic repair electronics equipment as far back as '81, because I worked at programs where they didn't want technicians looking at the equipment.
All right, so let's have a look at this plasma accelerator, which is the top secret technology which has enabled this thing to have these incredible characteristics. So that's my artist's impression of what I think it would look like inside. So the prototype was 200 feet along each side, so you're looking at maybe 100 feet diameter donut-shaped ring, and you could probably walk inside the structure, so you may be looking at something which is 10 feet in diameter. So this is pressurized to 150,000 atmospheres, and what they've done is they've used a particular material to make this accelerator from. Ed describes it as being as thin as a plastic bag, but you can't cut it with a knife or anything, extremely strong, and they use 12 layers on it, and that's how they managed to get something which will withstand 150,000 atmospheres of pressure, or 250,000 in the actual model, right? So they fill it with this plasma, which is a gas which has become ionized, which contains charged particles, and they're rotating in a circle at 40,000 cycles a second. So it's going around this 100-foot diameter circle 40,000 times a minute, RPM. Now, in physics, if you have a charged particle which moves, it generates a magnetic field at 90 degrees to itself. So if the charge flows that way, the magnetic field goes around that way. So what you would get is you get a magnetic field enveloping the craft. And Ed describes it as a magnetic vortex field. Now, it's my understanding that the reason why this field is so special is because it is so immense. It has a flux density beyond anything that they've been able to create in any laboratory. And it's due to the top secret material that we've made this plasma accelerator out of, right? And in this next clip, Ed talks about how they developed these accelerators in the mid-1960s with this special material.
Another friend who worked for General Dynamics in Fort Worth described a program in which he worked a plasma accelerator in the mid-60s, researching gravity warping techniques. He is a physicist by education and trade. This was his first top secret program. He described a four-light material, much like that discovered after Roswell crash. He described the foil as 12 layers of material less than 10,000ths of an inch thick. It was as flexible as a plastic trash bag, but virtually indestructible to piercing, burning, or cutting, which you've probably all heard before. Here's what you haven't heard. In order to cut the material used for the project, the material was supercooled, a large electrical charge was applied to polarize a molecular structure, and a laser cutter was applied in order to cut this material. Large ribbons of this material were used to reinforce the accelerator, which contained the mercury-based plasma that they started researching in 1965. The plasma was cooled to superconductive temperatures, rotated at 45,000 revolutions per minute, and pressurized at 150,000 atmospheres. This would be considered state-of-the-art technology even today.
Alright, so they've developed these particular accelerators, and then what they've done is that what they were trying to do was make a flying saucer, because that's what they back engineered it from. Right? But they had to put it in a triangle because they couldn't quite get the thing to cancel out its own weight on its own. So they put thrusters in the corners. He explains that in this next clip.
It was 200 feet across, the prototype. The technical reconnaissance TR-3B first flight was in the early 90s. The triangular-shaped, nuclear-powered aerospace platform was developed under the top-secret Aurora program. By 1994, there were $3 billion plus operational models. This operational model is 600 feet across. This flying triangle is not fiction. If you don't believe me, ask tens of thousands of people who have now spotted one version or another of it from Belgium to England. Ken can tell you about people who've seen England to Arizona. The TR-3B vehicle's outer coating is reactive to electrical radar stimulation. It can change reflectiveness, radar absorptiveness, and color. The circular plasma field accelerator ring, called the magnetic field disruptor, surrounds a rotatable crew compartment. It's far ahead of anything you've ever imagined as far as technology. Sandia and Livermore Laboratories developed a reverse-engineered MFD, and I believe the government will go to any lengths to protect this technology. The plasma in this accelerator is mercury-based. It's pressurized at 250,000 atmospheres at a temperature of 150 degrees Kelvin, superconductivity, and accelerated to 60,000 revolutions per minute to create a superconductive plasma with the resulting gravity energy. The MFD generates a magnetic vortex field which disrupts and neutralizes the effects of gravity on mass within proximity by 89%. This causes the effect of making the aircraft extremely light and able to outperform any aircraft yet constructed. TR-3B is a high-altitude stealth reconnaissance platform with indefinite loiter time. Once you get it up there at speed, it doesn't take much propulsion to maintain altitude. With the vehicle's man produced by 89%, the vehicle can travel at Mach 9 vertically or horizontally. So for those that have had sightings of things making right, and they're not perfect right turns, obviously. Nothing can make a perfect right turn. It's against the laws of physics. But it sure looks like a right turn at a distance.
Right, so it can reduce its own weight by 89%. So if you were sat in the crew compartment here, when it's floating above the earth, you weigh 10 stone, you're going to weigh 1 stone. So it's reducing the mass of the whole craft. Now, let's ask the question, is there anything we can check in physics to test whether we think Fouché is telling the truth or not? Well, here's a science paper written in 2010 entitled Generating Magnetic Field by a Rotating Plasma. This is 12 years after Fouché's disclosures. So we know that you can generate magnetic fields by moving plasma about. But can you use magnetics as a propulsive force? Can you use it for propulsion? In physics, the magnetic force is called the Lorentz force. So in any electrical machine, you normally have two components that you pass electricity through. And it's the interaction between the two magnetic fields of those two components which produces force. So normally, one component will be fixed and the other one is free to move. So in an electric motor, the rotor is free to move and the stator is fixed to the ground, and then you generate magnetic fields in both those components and it pushes around and it goes round and round and round. So can you use that same force to actually lift something up off the ground? Well, it's difficult because it's relying on the two magnetic fields interacting together. So if you used it to push something off the ground, what would happen is it would push off the ground and then the thing that's pushing it off the ground would be left there. So you can't use it for propulsion. A bit like trying to pick yourself up off a chair and float in midair, you can't do it. But what Fouché says is that force, the magnetic force, if you create a large magnetic field or vortex field, at some point it starts to have an effect on gravity. It starts to interfere with gravity. And physicists generally agree that the magnetic phenomenon, electromagnetic phenomenon, is linked to gravity, that all forces are linked to one force at some point. Right, now I'm going to explain why I think Fouché's claims are probably true. We can compare this plasma accelerator with copper wire and electricity, right? Because all we've got with this plasma, we've got charged particles going around here extremely fast, which create a magnetic field or vortex field as Ed describes it. Now, let's just consider copper wire and electricity. When we pass electricity down the wire, as I said before, we get a magnetic field going around that wire. And we could pass that wire in a loop, just like the TR3B. So our electrons are coming along the wire, they're going around in a circle, just like the particles in Ed's plasma accelerator. And the magnetic field here shown is what results from electricity flowing down the wire, right? Now, the magnetic field strength, or the flux density, measured in Tesla, is determined from electrons flowing down the wire. It's determined by this equation here. Now, don't get scared by it, I'm going to go through it. B equals mu naught over 4 pi. B is how strong the magnetic field is. We all know what a magnetic field is. We've all felt it with bridge magnets and whatnot. So the strength of the field is equal to mu naught over 4 pi. Now that's a constant that never changes, so we can pretty much forget that term. Over r squared. R is the distance from where the charge is flowing to the point where you're going to measure it. So we're going to measure B at that point. This is R. So all that's saying is, the further you get away from the charge, the lower the field. So it gets less as you come away from the charge, which is what you'd expect. So we'll pretty much forget that term. These are the two important terms. V is the speed of the electron. The speed of the electrons going around that loop. So if we double the speed of the electrons, we will double the strength of the magnetic field. Q is the charge, the total number of electrons. So if we were able to pass more electrons down that wire, for example, by increasing the diameter of the wire or increasing the current, again, it would increase the magnetic field. Now, in a wire with a DC current, that's how fast electrons travel down a wire. 0.735 millimeters per second. So when you're passing a current down a wire, an electron will travel just under a millimeter in 1 second. That's how fast they go. Now, let's compare that to the plasma, in the plasma accelerator. He said we have I think it's a 100-foot diameter plasma accelerator. If you work out the circumference, 40,000 cycles a second, this is the speed of particles in a plasma accelerator. 64,000 meters per second. That's 87 million times faster than an electron in a piece of wire. So that's suggesting that the magnetic field generated using a plasma accelerator will be millions of times higher than using just normal wire and electrons. Now let's look at the other term. Can we get similar charge density with plasma as in copper? Well, this is the charge density or the electron density in copper, 8.4 times 10 to the 22 electrons in 1 square centimeter of copper. What's the electron density in plasma? Well, the electron density in plasma varies according to the type of plasma and according to temperature. But if we look at the side here and we look at an electron density similar to copper, 10 to the 22 here, we see that metals, metal plasmas, at very low temperatures have a similar charge density. What did Ed say? He said that the plasma accelerator had to be supercooled to 150 degrees Kelvin, 10 to the 2. This is 100 degrees Kelvin, yeah? And he said it was a mercury-based plasma, which is a metal plasma, right? So a mercury-based plasma, if you supercool it to let's say minus 150 degrees or 150 degrees Kelvin, you're going to get similar electron density to copper. And this is possibly why they're supercooling it. Now, I said that I think using the plasma accelerator it might be possible to produce a magnetic field millions of times higher than it can with copper. So let's just look at magnetic field strengths in the world today. Look first at the magnetic field strength inside the core of a normal 60 Hertz power transformer is between 1 and 2 Tesla. Tesla is the unit of magnetic flux density. The highest constant magnetic field ever produced in any lab is just 45 Tesla, strongest continuous magnetic field produced. I particularly like this one. Where is it? 16 Tesla, the strength used to levitate a frog. Now they have produced higher magnetic fields in a laboratory than 45 Tesla, but only pulsed magnetic fields. Now pulsed magnetic fields are different because when a magnetic field changes, it produces voltage, which can blow laboratories up. So in this case here, they've actually blown the laboratory up, trying to create a pulsed magnetic field, 2.8 kilotesla. But I think we're talking about fixed magnetic fields here with this vortex field. If the plasma is going around at a fixed speed, then the magnetic vortex field is going to be fixed as well. So let's say they can produce a magnetic field of 10,000 Tesla. Yeah? The highest magnetic field science has managed to produce is just 45 Tesla. So there's no scientist on this planet would be able to say to me, if you can produce a 10,000 Tesla fixed magnetic field, that it doesn't affect gravity, because they haven't produced one. And I think that the mathematics that I've just showed you, or the physics, suggests to me there's something to all of this. Because I don't think Fouché has sat and gone through all of this. He's not a physicist, he's an avionics engineer. I don't think he's looked at the characteristics of plasma when he supposedly made a story. And the two guys that were trying to debunk Ed Fouché on the internet, none of them were challenging his physics. They were saying, oh, he forged a document. So this looks likely to me when you look at the actual physics of it. And the reason why white science in our known about laboratories maybe haven't done it is because they haven't got that material to make this plasma accelerator strong enough to rotate the plasma at such a high speed. So they've never discovered it. Now, Ed said that this is in 1990, the craft could go Mach 9 in either direction. Right? So if this craft is just hovering above this building and it zips up, upwards, vertically upwards, at Mach 9, it'd be in space in 40 seconds. 40 seconds to get into space. And we were all sitting looking at the space shuttle going, 10, 9, 8, thinking that that technology is fantastic. Now, if we make some assumptions that they've improved these vehicles since 1990, tenfold, let's say, that would mean they'd be able to go at around 70,000 miles an hour, which would take 4 hours to travel to the moon and just 3 weeks to get to Mars. And these things probably can be parked up for years at a time if they wanted to. They could perhaps even use them as a base, so fly into Mars and just leave them there permanently. Or leave them in orbit permanently around neighbouring planets, around the Sun, around the Earth, or on the Moon. Now, do you think if they've got that capability, they're not going to do that? They're just going to say, hey, we've invented these TR3Vs, aren't they good? Like, what we're going to do next, lads? Or do you think they're going to fly them around the solar system? I do.
It's been kind of mainstream recently, graphene.
Say again, the
graphene.
What's that?
It's a new material.
All right, okay.
It's very layers of carbon, and that is very thin, incredibly strong, and highly conductive.
Okay.
Really effective by temperature.
Right. All right. We'll maybe talk about that in the discussion after. Okay. Now, okay. They have covered this in mainstream because there was a History Channel documentary recently where they were talking about the TR3V, but interesting, what they were saying was that the Belgian UFO flap is quite likely that it was a secret craft, and they mentioned the TR3V that had microshrapnel, but they didn't have Ed Fouché on with the claims come from. And this is what it said on the History Channel documentary. They said, yeah, it may well be a secret aircraft, but they're probably just developing them to ward off aliens from outer space. So they kind of justified it. They didn't say, why aren't they telling anyone about them? And why are they flying them over airspace of NATO countries and then chasing them? Because there was another flight in 1997, the Sheffield UFO incident, the flying triangle, where a jet chased one and ended up crashing. I think the guy ejected and survived, but that was covered up. And I suspect that was a covert military craft as well. So documentaries such as the History Channel, they're not really making a political statement about this, about the fact that they should be telling people what they're doing with the public's money. They just say, oh, maybe they're just protecting us from aliens. Okay. Now, someone else who's made claims of a secret space program is a guy called William Hamilton, I think also in 1998.
This colonel was a real warrior type guy, and he had a degree in plasma physics.
What a surprise.
He was also a consultant to NASA. He was a consultant to people out at the Palos Verdes nuclear power generating station just 50 miles west of Phoenix. The other thing he said was there was a base on the moon. I find that quite astounding. I mean, I've heard astounding things, not only from this colonel, okay, but also probably the highest rank was a retired 3-star general, lieutenant general in the Air Force. And he knew another guy that I was in contact with, and this other guy claims that he worked 7 years on the U.S. anti-gravity program. And that's a fraction of what he told me. And I've got a tape recorded. It's true. Whoa. What a sham the space program is. Because there's another space program going on. A secret space program. And that's what I was attempting to find. In fact, you don't have to go too far to find that there is some secret space programs going on, because they had their own shuttles and their own astronaut crews right up here at Vandenberg Air Force Base, unbeknownst to everybody, and they scuttled a $5 billion facility that was housed there at one time. That was back in the 80s. But the kind of space program he was talking about is using a spacecraft that can leave the bounds of our atmosphere and travel to the planet Mars at 0.8 C. 8/10 the speed of light. And I said, how do you know that? I've been there, he said.
Right, so if we listen to Ed Fouché, these craft are not being developed by NASA. They're being developed by some secret part of the US Air Force and the NSA. So we come on to NASA. Now, Barack Obama made a speech at the Kennedy Space Center in 2010. And he's laying out what they're going to be doing over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And if you listen carefully to him, I think it's, bearing in mind the first part of my presentation, I think you can see that NASA is just a cover organization. Think, for example, of your mobile phone technology and compare that to 1960s technology, how much it's advanced, and then compare that to propulsion, the propulsion technologies used in space vehicles in the 1960s. And what NASA is showing us now, it's no different. They're still building rockets at NASA, all right? So what I've done in this clip of Obama, I've actually put my own comments on the screen as to what I think is really going on.
We're no longer racing against an adversary. We're no longer competing to achieve a singular goal like reaching the moon. In fact, what was once a global competition has long since become a global collaboration. By doing that, we will ramp up robotic exploration of the solar system, including a probe of the sun's atmosphere, new scouting missions to Mars and other destinations, and an advanced telescope to follow Hubble, allowing us to peer deeper into the universe than ever before. We will increase Earth-based observation to improve our understanding of our climate and our world. And we will extend the life of the International Space Station likely by more than 5 years, while actually using it for its intended purpose. And in order to reach the space station, we will work with a growing array of private companies competing to make getting to space easier and more affordable. We will build on the good work already done on the Orion crew capsule. I directed Charlie Bolden to immediately begin developing a rescue vehicle using this technology, and this Orion effort will be part of the technological foundation for advanced spacecraft to be used in future deep space missions. In fact, Orion will be ready for flight right here in this room. We will invest more than $3 billion to conduct research on an advanced heavy lift rocket, a vehicle to efficiently send into orbit the crew capsules, propulsion systems, and large quantities of supplies needed to reach deep space. And developing this new vehicle, we will not only look at revising or modifying older models, we want to look at new designs, new materials, new technologies that will transform not just where we can go, but what we can do when we get there. And we will finalize a rocket design no later than 2015 and then begin to build it.
The design
by 2025, we expect a new spacecraft designed for long journeys to allow us to begin the first ever crewed missions beyond the moon into deep space. We'll start by sending astronauts to an asteroid for the first time in history.
It's the best place
By the mid-2030s, I believe we can send humans to orbit Mars and return them safely to Earth. And a landing on Mars will follow. And I expect to be around to see it.
It's just another pop-up.
Space exploration, the development of breakthrough propulsion systems and other advanced technologies. So I'm challenging NASA to break through these barriers. And we'll give you the resources to break through these barriers. And I know you will. Ingenuity and intensity, because that's what you've always done.
I've lost my bullshit. Or rings around Uranus. Or the dark side of Uranus. Right, okay. Now, you may have heard Fouché mention that the material that we got to build the plasma accelerator was back engineered from a UFO. And as I said, I think what we're trying to do when we're building the TR-3B, experimenting with it, is to try and replicate a flying saucer, but they couldn't quite do it, so they had to put these thrusters on the 3 points of the triangle, put the thing in the middle of the triangle and add some more conventional technology to it. So, and Fouché does speak about pilots that he spoke to flying some of these high-performance aircraft, and he says they've almost all seen UFOs, right? So I'm not saying that UFOs are not a real phenomenon, it absolutely is. And I've covered some of the very darker elements of ufology in my film, the one before last, called UFOs and NATO, the Human Mutilation Cover-Up. Now, once you get into UFOs, most people will find out about animal mutilation. This is where, in areas where there's high UFO activity, we find animals turning up, fully exsanguinated of all their blood, with particular surgical injuries carried out on them that are not predation. There's a huge mystery attached to what the true purpose of animal mutilations are. Now, I revealed, as I said in my latest film, that this has been happening to human beings, because I eventually managed to make contact with someone who I've been trying to get close to for the last 4 or 5 years. Because there's a military source actually gave information to a guy called Derek Goff in 1997, and he held on to a lot of that information. He put some of it out. I managed to get close to Goff in 2011, but he wouldn't go on camera. Eventually got Goff to talk, and then eventually I managed to interview the military source. And this is not a lecture about the subject, but the point I'm making in this lecture is the UFO subject is an extremely important subject, and it's an extremely serious subject, because there are some dark elements of it, which is possibly to do with why it's covered up. They don't want the mass public knowing that UFO events have been linked to human beings that have been turned up mutilated with surgical injuries on their body. I mean, Bill Cooper made claims in the 80s that some of the 1947-48 crash retrievals, those UFOs contained human body parts, and it freaked them out. And that's why, one of the reasons why we put the lid on the UFO cover-up, or tightened it down further, right? So this is an extremely serious subject, but I think everyone has the right to know the truth about it, all right? Now, I spoke about mainstream documentaries in part one, and about how I think they all just use for purposes of subversion and to send people down the wrong avenue. And I just pose the question, why don't we hear the best evidence, the stuff that I've just given you there about Ed Fouché, the stuff about triangles, the stuff about animal mutilations, and even information about Madeleine McCann? Why don't we get it on mainstream media? Well, mainstream media have approached me on more than one occasion to take part in their documentaries, and every time I refuse. This is an email from a production company called Plum Pictures, who are currently producing a documentary for Channel 4. It says, Plum Pictures are in the process of making a film about the ET cover-up. I wanted to talk in more detail with you about possible involvement. So they want me to take part in a Channel 4 documentary about the ET cover-up. Great, let's get it out there. Let's get the truth on mainstream television for once, right? Now, they did approach me in a previous documentary and I refused to take part in that. I'm going to explain why after I've played this phone call to you. And this phone call highlights the problem with mainstream media very well, I think. Not just on the UFO issue, but on all the issues that they're covering things up on 9/11, on 7/7, and even on Madeleine McCann. Alright? So, this is about a 9-minute long phone call, and I'm going to play the whole thing because I think we'll glean a lot from this phone call. So they're trying to get me to take part in their documentary about UFOs.
Hello, John speaking.
Hello John, my name's Richard Hall. I got an email from you asking if I was interested in taking part in the film that you're making.
Oh, hi Richard, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Oh, thanks for giving me a call. I was just about to kind of try and hunt you down because that number on your site isn't
Yeah, that doesn't work.
doesn't go through anymore. So, shall I tell you a little bit about what we're doing?
Yeah, sure.
We are making a documentary for Channel 4 about the ET cover-up / conspiracy, and it's a presenter-led film. We've got a guy called Dan Schreiber who is kind of taking us on the journey, and he is one of the head writers on QI, and he produces Media for Curiosity on Radio 4, so he's kind of he's not an expert in the field by any means, but he's really interested in it, in this whole topic. So we've been going around the country speaking to various different people and getting their views and theories on what's going on with regards to aliens and extraterrestrials, and how, if there is, how it's being covered up by the government or other parties involved. And I just wanted to, few people mentioned your name. I know you run quite a big website, not just podcast and ETs, but with the whole kind of truth movement. And I just wanted to kind of get your take on the whole thing and see if you'd be interested in talking to us.
Okay, well, can I ask a few questions?
Sure.
So, you mentioned ET cover-up. So that expresses two things to me. It's saying whoever's making the film must believe that extraterrestrials exist and that they're being covered up. Do you believe those two things?
I personally am open-minded. I'm not really, I don't really know either way, but obviously it's just that this will have to learn further.
Okay, so if you're passionate enough to make a Channel 4 program and get it commissioned, how can you possibly not believe in what you're actually producing?
Well, it's exploration of what the different theories out there. It's not saying this is definitely happening or this is definitely happening. It's looking at this, going through different people.
Alright, okay, so it's more about looking at the people rather than trying to find the truth on their evidence.
No, it's looking at, it's examining the theories.
Okay. Now,
I get really excited about all the different theories.
Right, okay.
We're not making a decision about whether they're true or not. We're just kind of examining the different layers of theories.
Okay. Now you mentioned in your email ET cover-up. What will the title of the program be?
Something along those lines. That is our working
No, well, what is the title that will appear on Channel 4?
Oh, I have no idea.
The reason why I asked that is because the last documentary was called Confessions of an Alien Abductee. I'm pretty sure they wouldn't have told anyone taking part in that what the title was.
Channel 4 will decide.
So they're debunking the subject before it even comes on the screen.
Okay, so you can't give me that, okay, alright.
The working title, as I said,
On Benedict's and Brown, there's another example.
and it will be on the release form, is Down Tribal Project, the big ET cover-up. And our top line is cover-up conspiracy, that's our...
And, so do you know when it will air?
No, I don't. It will be later on this year.
Okay.
But we have...
This year, 2014.
Alright,
during time, so it will be later this year, but I can't say when.
Now, you mentioned my website, and as you said, there's a lot of information on there now. I've produced 49 TV shows which cover the UFO subject.
Yeah.
And I've made 7 feature-length films.
Yeah.
And they're all evidence-based. Okay, now, I see that you've been to film Miles Johnson at the Basis Conference. Now, as far as I'm concerned, Miles Johnson is not a serious researcher. He promotes fantasists and people who are delusional. I don't know why he does that. I have a theory on that, but there's no way I would be associated with any documentary that features the likes of Miles Johnson, because you might as well go to the circus if you're going to put people like him on. So there's no way I would agree to be in the same TV show as Miles Johnson. Now the other thing will be, I would only agree to take part if you gave me editorial control of the program. Would you be able to do that?
No, absolutely. I mean, I can't, it's just not within my right to do that.
Would you be able to request that from because obviously you did say that you did.
What do you mean exactly?
Well, I would like to view the program that you intend to air before it airs.
Yeah.
So that I could have the final say in whether it airs or not. So if there's any...
That's just not something that broadcasters do. We contributed the right to say, actually, change that.
I understand that's how the way you work, but I also believe that is that's why we never get any truth on television. Because your industry works in that way. I don't work that way when I produce television programs. I let people see what I'm going to air, and if they're not happy with it, I will change it.
I mean, I can show you things that were going on perhaps, but there's no, I could never do editing.
Your industry has a history of trapping people into making these kind of documentaries and then ridiculing them on screen. That's why. No, that is, I can give you a list of people who will make that claim.
Who will what, sorry?
Who will make that claim, that they were trapped into making a documentary.
Oh, I'm not claiming that I'm being trapped into making any sort of documentary. I just wanted to kind of... the documentary that we're making doesn't have an agenda, and it's not setting out to ridicule anyone. We have quite
okay, well...
That we don't want to ridicule people.
Yeah, so, right, there will be a single-page program proposal for this documentary then, yes?
Well, not really, no.
Well, no, the industry works on program proposals, so there must be.
Well, there are treatments written and submitted to Channel 4, yes, at the development stage.
Right. Would you be able to email me all of those treatments that have been emailed to Channel 4 so I can have a look at them and see what it is that you're trying to make in this program?
I can email you some information about the program, absolutely. It's going to be exactly what I just told you. We're exploring the ET phenomenon, specifically the cover-up conspiracy surrounding the subject. We're making a non-judgmental documentary about the different theories that are out there, and we don't have any specific agenda with it.
Right, well, if you're going to screen Miles Johnston in the Basis Conference, you're not making a non-judgmental program. I mean, you might as well go to the circus. If you're going to screen that. That is not a non-judgmental documentary on the ET cover-up, because that conference is not about the ET cover-up. It's a rodeo show.
That was our that was more research than anything else, if I did what to do. And obviously, I can't say what's going to end up in the final or not. But
Okay, well, if you're not prepared to give me any editorial control, then
I can't do that.
Right, okay, well, there's no way that would, that's the only condition.
I can't give you editorial control of the programme we're making for Channel 4. It just doesn't work like that.
Well, I know it doesn't work like that, and that's what's wrong with the television industry.
Okay, well, I don't think we're going to get anywhere in that case. I mean, it's totally up to you. I don't want to coerce you into doing anything. I just thought it would be interesting to speak to you.
Okay.
I know that you have some kind of on current great theories and you're kind of critical.
It's not theories, I present evidence.
Yeah. Well,
And I advise that you watch, but please do not take any comment from the UFOs and NATO, the human mutilation cover-up, because there are people who are being mutilated and left in remote places in connection with UFOs, and the military have tried to fire particular weapons at UFOs.
yeah,
Right, and it's an extremely serious subject which you should not be ridiculing, which it sounds like you are to me. Well, if you want to treat it seriously, then you should be giving the likes of me editorial control.
That's it. I mean, you can't say that.
Yes, well, I just have.
You can't say that, but that's really the subject.
Well, okay. Well, I tell you what. Let me judge that when you produce what you produce, because every other program that's appeared on Channel 4 this nature has been a ridicule attempt.
Okay, I mean, we're trying to tread a different path here, but there's only
Well, I don't believe you.
I can only try to reassure you. I'm doing all I can. All I'm saying is I'd like you to be involved, but there's just no way that I can give you a choice.
Right, well, there's no way I can take part then. Okay.
Okay.
Alright. Thank you. Cheers now. Bye-bye.
Alright, so yeah. To get some beers into that one, so later this year, you can see why I've never been on mainstream TV, right? Why would I do that? Now, you might think I've been a bit harsh on Miles Johnson there, if you don't know who he is. Miles Johnson, the previous documentary, as I said, was called Confessions of an Alien Abductee. And about 18 months before that was produced, an organisation was set up called AMASH. Anyone heard of that?
Yes.
AMASH stands for Anomalous Mind Management Abductee Contactee Helpline, and it's a helpline that was set up by Miles and a few other people to help people who make claims of alien abduction. And they provided the subjects for that documentary. So when they were making that documentary, the same production company actually contacted me because they wanted to use the clip where I challenged David Cameron on UFOs. So they said, can we use that clip? And I said to them, well, I'm not sure about this. You would need to show the whole clip in its entire context. You would need to show David Cameron's apology to me and read out his written apology, because he wrote me a letter apologising. And you also need to show the bit where I challenged David Cameron and put him on the back foot on it. Right? So they didn't use that clip. So they wanted to use it for purposes of ridicule, probably. Now, if you've seen that documentary, it's a laughing stock. It's a pure hit piece on people who make claims of alien abduction. Right? That's what it was. It was a psychological operation to make people think there's nothing to abduction. Right? Miles Johnson was the key person who collaborated with Channel 4 to get those subjects into that programme. So I even suspect that the AMASH was possibly set up purely for the purposes of that programme. I don't know that to be true, but I think it's possible. Now, Miles Johnson is now operating under his other name, the Basis Conference, or Basis, right? He's dropped the AMASH, probably because people were so annoyed at the Alien Abductee documentary. But he's collaborating with Plum Pictures now. So he's allowed them into his Basis Conference to take whatever content they want, which may well appear in this documentary. I don't know that it is. So at the time of the first documentary, before that went out, I said to him, Miles, why are you getting involved with Channel 4? You know it's going to be a hit piece. What are you doing? You're supposed to be part of the truth movement. Oh, well, you've got to give them a chance, Richard. You've got to give them a chance. This one could be different. Yet he's doing it again with this. And he said that I should be involved. Well, I need to be clear about what I'm saying here. I've got all the emails to back up what I'm saying between myself and Miles Johnson. Right? So he has provided the subjects for these hit piece UFO ridiculing documentaries. So I don't think I've been unfair on Miles Johnson in what I said in that telephone call. is collaborating with mainstream. Collaborating with mainstream. And like the Miliband thing, right? No, we should not be entering into negotiations with puppets, because these guys are puppets. They will have been commissioned probably from the intelligence agencies to make this hit piece documentary. They are puppets, just like Miliband. You're not talking to the organ grinder, you're talking to monkeys here, professional piss takers. And I should go begging to them to take part in their documentary, they're going to make fun of me. We should be exposing mainstream, not collaborating with them. Thank you. I need on this. Yeah, I'll just yeah, but if you want to ask a question I don't know the answer, I would say I don't know the answer. So anyone want to make a comment or pose a question? Who wants to kick this off?
TR3B.
Jump in. Just into the mic, so just so I know you got a question.
The TR3B, is that taken from the Nazi logo? Do you think that came from that when these paperclips, they were all taken to America, weren't they?
Yeah, well, there were engineers taken from Nazi Germany who worked for the CIA. Now, Ed says that it was back engineered, so ultimately it came from a UFO, so it came from non-human intelligences. Now, whether that was by the Nazis, I don't know, maybe it was, or maybe Nazi scientists worked on it as well with their knowledge of the Nazi bell. So I think it's quite possible that Nazis from, after the war, were involved in that. Sure, it's definitely possible. Werner von Braun and people like that. Yeah.
Sorry, what year was that first spotted? What was the first recorded spotted incident for those?
Yeah, I know that there was black triangles over Hudson Valley. I think that was in early 80s. It was either 83 or earlier.
They were the same proportions, like massive in size.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of any. I've had sightings reported of black triangles. Earliest one in Cornwall, 1976.
That maybe 40, 50 years later.
Yeah, so I think they've been developing for a long time. Because the plasma accelerator, as he said, was 1965. They put that in a craft. So the earliest ones maybe 1970, something like that. That would be a guess.
As I understand it, sorry to go on, but what you're suggesting is that technology is alien technology, is that right?
They've got the idea from that. They've seen something in a recovered craft. They've worked out what the basic components are doing. It's got plasma in it. It seems to, and then they've built a new one, or their version of it, with the materials that they've got at their disposal. Any others? They're going to do one. They're not just going to put it in a museum, are they?
Is it possible with all these secret spaceships being made that I heard a theory that they could use these secret ships to cause up a fake alien invasion and therefore uniting us into a new world order? Have you heard about that? Or?
Yeah, I've heard about that, and obviously that was very well publicised just before the Olympics, because people were suggesting that it was going to be used at the Olympics. But there's no way I can tell you whether I think that's going to happen. Obviously there were claims from Werner von Braun that there was going to be, I think it was fake terrorist threats, followed by fake asteroid threats, followed by fake alien threats. Who knows?
Can I just ask you again, are you already from the same like the Indian power, would you regard these people that are not referred to as the Illuminati? Is there any hidden agenda, the control base? Is it all the same people that we're looking at, or
If you find out, tell us. Honestly, I don't know that, you know. It's a very question a lot of people ask, and I couldn't possibly answer that. I think secret societies like the Freemasons, I think a lot of conspiracy is they use that organisation to maintain secrecy throughout certain programs. Yeah, because once you get to a certain level in those organisations, your mouth is firmly shut. You know what I mean? We've already got an organisation there which is tightly controlled. So I think they operate in using secret societies. There's a lot of high-ranking police officers. So, for example, I think there was elements of that in the McCann case to do with Freemasonry as to how they've kept their cover-up going. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Richard, with shutting down controversial TV, edge media going down, you going down, what are your views on H2 doing Ancient Aliens and all the new stuff that's going on Sky H2 platform, which is all current to what you've been talking about, but just not as in depth as what you've done today?
Right, yeah. I mentioned it before that the History Channel didn't mention the TR3B, but it's softened off so that people aren't going to get upset about it. That would be my view on it. So they actually had a reconstruction of a TR3B outperforming this jet aircraft on the History Channel. But as I said, they said, well, if they are building these craft, they're probably just to ward off evil aliens, so don't worry about
They
it.
have got an agenda, haven't they?
Yeah.
Let's be honest, that the media empire from Sky have got their agenda, putting it out on H2 and, like you say, the History Channel, Geographic, all of them.
I don't think they can deny the UFO phenomenon and extraterrestrial visitation. They have to cover it because so many people are interested in it, so they can't just ignore it, so they will cover it and put their own spin on it.
I believe they've gone down again since the 70s, so...
Right, yeah. Any other points, or yes, ma'am? The front here.
Slightly off topic, but some of us aren't on Facebook, and I've been following you since 2011, and I've seen you've got a forum on your site. Any plans to open that to new guests?
No. Yeah, because we had, I don't know how many years ago it is now, it's a good few years ago, where one particular forum member was just, in my opinion, being deliberately disruptive. So he's on there to disrupt. So I let him go on for so much time, give him enough rope, and then I just cut him off. And he had 2 profiles. Maybe I shouldn't say that because I haven't told him that I know that. Oh no, I did. I'm not to tell him how I know he had 2 profiles. So he was coming on as well. An issue would come up, and then they were arguing, say the TR3B or something like that, and he'd say, well, isn't that right, such and such? So he's got both profiles. So there were things like that, and I do think whoever it is, GCHQ probably in this country, have profiles on forums where they try and disrupt any forums that are going to challenge them. But I did put out an appeal for a moderator, and until someone's prepared to moderate their forum, because I'm not getting involved in it, because it would take up your entire life, moderating a forum. I haven't got a team of people working for me or anything like that, so I'd like to see you say, yeah, you can join the forum, but I've almost come to the point where I'm just going to pull the plug on the whole thing. I know Andrew Johnson did that. He just said, well, forums, they're outdated now, you cannot use them because all they are is a target for trolls and disinformation. So people hide behind profiles. So they're not really a good source of getting the truth out. So, and Facebook seems to have overtaken a lot of the forums now. But it's, Facebook. Alright. Chat away.
Thank you very much. UFOs and collaboration. Is there any evidence that organisations out on Earth have collaborated and produced UFOs with alien intelligence?
Well, it comes from the disclosures of the likes of Fouché. I mean, he's saying that they had the recovered craft. Are you saying that they're actually in two-way communication?
And is there a Yes.
There are whistleblowers that allude to that, such as Bob Lazar, was one, or Dan Sherman is another, who claims that he was trained in this intuitive communication to actually get messages from this race of aliens that the NSA is supposedly getting messages from. So, but it's all witness testimony, and I don't think there's any piece of technology where you can put on display and say, that's it. It's a lot of evidence is thin, for sure.
The picture of NATO that you showed there with evidence of human mutilation and UFOs being shot out of the sky. Are you saying that was NATO actually shooting out of the sky?
A NATO-led operation, or under the umbrella of NATO, because they were operating in lots of different countries, but it was controlled by the Yanks. That's what the word the guy used was. The operation was controlled by the Yanks, but under the guise of NATO, so they could operate in all these different countries.
But is it a form of, are they shutting the information down? Is it like a form of disinformation?
It's what form of disinformation?
Why would they want to shoot down?
Well, according to this guy, who I believe to be reliable, he said there's 8 systems worldwide, and this is in the mid-90s he's talking about, that use some kind of weapon, and it's not ballistic, it's some electromagnetic or
directed energy.
Yeah, something which is not visible to the naked eye, which they can fire at a UFO and it can affect its propulsion and bring it down. That's what he said. He said they've got, I think he said, one in Germany, a few in the US, and one in the UK.
Right.
And they will fire them when they're above military controlled areas.
Yeah.
So they're bringing them down in controlled areas. They're not moving to the city. That's what he said.
Right. So, and that goes back to my original question, which I'm confused. They don't want to anger this alien intelligence, but they wouldn't want to do that.
Well, I think they're trying to acquire the hardware. That would be one.
So they're working in collaboration with it.
Well, you see, there's a lot of mysteries in this. The other thing that he said was this group know what nights they're going to appear on and what direction they're going to come from. So they would have an operation where that team, he might be sending out to Alaska in a jet the day before, or Australia, where they know there's going to be a wave or there's going to be UFO activity, and they're ready in a helicopter for when the weapon is fired to just retrieve whatever's on the ground. So they've got advanced intelligence as to where they're going to be and when. But he was a black ops guy. They're not going to tell him how they know that. You see, so that's still a big mystery as to how that NATO group had this intelligence about where they're going to be. I mean, it might link into Bruce Cathy's work, where it's to do with the positioning of the planets at certain dates and times that they appear. Do you know what I mean? It might be that they have tapped into certain communications, who knows?
Okay, thanks for that. Just to say that forums, yes, it's terrible places. Everything I write just gets deleted. And there's just loads of operatives just waiting there for you, just to get into an argument.
And often you'll find, if you Google something that is covered up, and you'll find it, on the Google listing, it'll have that comment, and it might be on a mainstream forum like the Telegraph or something like that. You click on it and it's not there. So their moderators are deleting anything that they don't want. They're heavily moderated all the mainstream forums.
I speak the just personal experience on DT in particular. Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay. Other question or comment?
Have you heard of Mark Richards?
Don't know that name.
No. Have you heard of Project Camelot?
Yeah, I know Project Camelot, yeah.
Yeah, Kerry Cassidy?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, there's a guy that's, he's in prison, and he's Captain Mark Richards, and he's given a lot of information out.
Is he the one that was like a guidance missile engineer? Like Tomahawk missiles, no?
No. He was in a special unit, and he was all I know is he's in a special unit. He's been bunged up. He's British. His name is Mark Richards, and you can go on Camelot, Project Camelot and listen to.
I'm not aware of that yet.
All right.
I mean, it's like a lot of things, Project Camelot, Miles Johnson, mixed bag. There's a lot of disinformation out there. And I can't sit here and say that I haven't been used when I've interviewed certain people. A year later I look back on it and think, hang on, is that what I really thought it was? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you got to join up the dots. You got to look at, you know.
Yeah, you've got everything.
Yeah, you've got to have a look, and then.
There's a lot of red herrings out there.
I understand that.
I think one of them, the Madeleine case, a lot of you might have heard of this Australian, or some South African guy who climbed over Robert Murat's fence and did radar tests in Robert Murat's garden, saying the Madeleine's buried under there.
Yeah.
I think that's probably a red herring. I think he may have been put up to do that. Because, as is the police operation, it's the same, but it's just aimed at different. The police operation where they're searching, where they went out recently, they're just aimed at different groups, but they're both red herrings.
Yeah, I think that.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
Alright folks, well I think I might have a drink now and wander outside. I really appreciate your support because I did have to put the price up to £12. I don't like charging £12, but it's to try and keep the thing going. But thank you for coming and enjoying it.